Hey guys, tonight we were heading somewhere colder than your ex's heart and twice as emotionally confusing the Viking age. But not as a Viking, oh no. You're not swinging an axe or shouting in Old Norse. You're the one getting captured. That's right, tonight you'll experience life as a Viking captive. Wet, cold, confused, and deeply regretting every decision that led you near a coastline. Before we dive in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment telling me where you're listening from. I guarantee at least one of you is lying in bed at 3 a.m. with your phone an inch from your face, pretending this counts as rest. Now dim those lights, switch on a fan for some soothing wind noises, pretend it's the North Sea but without the hypothermia, and snuggle in. Let us pause for a moment. Have you ever wondered what it actually felt like to be captured by Vikings? How fast were those raids? What did it smell like when 50 unwashed Norsemen shared a ship? Did captives ever get seasick? Or did they just stay sick forever? Could you get promoted from bound peasant to indoor thrall? And how does one even politely ask for freedom from someone whose job title is raider? Well, congratulations. You've just woken up on a Viking longship. The year is around 865 CE. You have no idea where you are. Your wrists hurt, and the man rowing next to you just sneezed something historically significant onto your face. Welcome to your new life. It starts before dawn. The birds haven't even had their morning arguments yet. You're dreaming about breakfast when your entire village begins screaming. The Vikings are here, and they've brought axes, enthusiasm, and zero regard for personal space. Within minutes, you're running barefoot across wet grass, discovering just how aerodynamic a Norseman can be when chasing you downhill. The first thing you notice after the yelling, smoke, and emotional breakdowns is how fast it all happens. One moment you're a proud villager with a nice clay bowl and plans for barley soup, and the next, you're part of history's least voluntary exchange program. The smell hits next. Burning thatch, sweat, iron, and panic, a scent so distinct it could have its own candle called Viking Raid. Despair Edition. Your village doesn't even stand a chance. The Norsemen are professionals at this. They arrive like a bad hangover suddenly, violently, and with more shouting than you thought possible before sunrise. You see your neighbour's chicken make a heroic but doomed attempt to flee, flapping madly across the muddy path before a burly Viking scoops it up, yelling something that probably translates to "dinner acquired." You try to hide, maybe behind a fence, a cart, or a vague sense of optimism. It doesn't matter. The Vikings see everything. These are people who've spent their lives spotting monasteries from a mile out. They can find you behind a haystack in 3 seconds. Flat. A hand grabs you by the shoulder. You spin around and find yourself face to beard with a man who looks like he could bench press your entire family. His teeth are surprisingly good, which is both impressive and unsettling. He says something you don't understand, but the tone is unmistakable. Congratulations, you are coming with us. You'd protest, but you're too busy trying not to faint. Someone ties your wrists together with rope that feels more like disappointment than fibre. You're marched toward the shore, stumbling as the ground shifts beneath your bare feet. Behind you, the village burns a flickering light show that will definitely not be featured in the tourism brochure. As you walk, you realize this might actually be the best possible outcome. The unlucky ones are already lying still on the ground. The Vikings don't waste effort. If you are still alive, it means you're worth something. You try to find comfort in that. You fail. You pass by other captives, wide-eyed, trembling, whispering prayers to gods who probably hit the snooze button this morning. Someone else wailing. Someone else is bargaining. You, however, have gone emotionally numb, which turns out to be the medieval version of self-care. You focus on small details to stay calm, the crunch of wet earth under your feet, the metallic rattle of weapons, the hiss of the sea somewhere ahead. The Vikings move with a kind of terrifying coordination. They are laughing, shouting to each other, and looting with the casual efficiency of a moving company that has done this 1,000 times, which, of course, they have. One guy grabs a barrel of ale, another stuffs his pockets with anything shiny. You catch a glimpse of a young raider trying on a stolen priest S-hat and laughing so hard he nearly drops his sword. It is chaos, but organised chaos like a nightmare managed by professionals. You spot a few villagers trying to fight back, brave but pointless. One man swings a pitchfork at a Viking S shield, only for the Viking to look offended like someone just insulted his haircut before knocking him flat with a single shove. You can help thinking, maybe running was the right choice. Then, over the roar of flames and waves, you hear something else, the low creak of wooden hulls rocking in the tide. The longships are waiting, sleek, slender, carved with snarling dragon heads that look like they were designed specifically to ruin your morning. The raiders herd you and the others toward them, shouting orders, dragging captives through the sand. The air smells of salt and smoke. You glance back one last time. Your home is gone, just ash and echoes. You think about your family, your friends, your half-eaten breakfast. You'd cry if you weren't so dehydrated from fear. As the Vikings shove you toward the ship, one of them pats your shoulder. He grins, not cruelly, but like this is all perfectly normal. For him, it is. For you, it's the start of a long and unpleasant adventure that nobody asked for. You're pushed into the boat, hands bound, heart pounding, brain looping the same thought over and over. Maybe next life, Donti live near the coast. And as the oars dip into the water and your world drifts away behind you, you realize you've officially joined history, just not on the side that gets to write it. You've been captured. A hand like a tree trunk grabs your arm, and before you can say I don't even like boats, you're thrown onto one. The longship smells like wet leather and regret. The Vikings row in perfect rhythm, chanting something that sounds suspiciously like a gym playlist for people who own battle axes. The first thing you learn about Viking transportation is that comfort was not a design priority. There are no seats, no cushions, no complimentary drinks, just rough planks of timber slick with seawater and history's worst customer service. The floor rocks beneath you like an over-caffeinated seesaw. You try to steady yourself, which is hard when your wrists are tied, and you're also trying not to make eye contact with the guy sharpening a spear 2 feet away. The oarsmen work like a single organism, synchronized, powerful, and terrifyingly sweaty. Each stroke sends up a splash that soaks everyone, including you, which feels less like a refreshing mist and more like being baptized by seawater and poor decisions. The man nearest you smells of onions and destiny. He looks down at you and grins, showing teeth that suggest dentistry has not yet been invented. You're wedged between other captives, peasants, monks. One woman who keeps muttering prayers in Latin, as if God might suddenly appear with a rescue boat. The ropes around your wrists chafe. The salt stings your skin, and every time the ship hits a wave, your stomach does its own little rebellion. You're trying to keep it together, but your body is actively auditioning for the role of human ragdoll. Every few minutes, a Viking shouts something, and everyone on board adjusts the rhythm. The language is foreign, harsh, and musical in a way that is both beautiful and alarming, like someone turned thunder into poetry. You don't know what they were saying, but it's probably something motivational like row harder or the gods will make fun of you. The shoreline shrinks behind you. Your village fades into a smoky blur. Ahead lies nothing but grey waves and the occasional bird who seems to be mocking you. You watch the sea churn and wonder how far you'll go, a few miles, a few days, Forever? Nobody tells you, because nobody cares. You're not a passenger, you're a luggage. At some point, the Vikings start eating. They pull out chunks of dried fish and pass around a jug of ale that smells like fermented bad choices. One of them offers you a piece of bread, maybe out of pity, maybe just to stop you from looking so depressing. It's stale, but it's food. You eat it slowly, pretending it is a 5-course meal at a restaurant that definitely doesn't exist yet. The waves grow rougher as the wind picks up. The longship creaks and groans like it's considering early retirement. You clutch the edge of the hull with your bound hands, praying it holds. A Viking laughs as another wave crashes over the bow, drenching everyone. He shouts something joyous, probably good omen. Meanwhile, you're busy, calculating how long it would take to drown if you just leaned a little too far forward. Hours blur together. The world becomes a rhythm of oars, waves, and nausea. The Vikings chant to keep time, their deep voices rolling over the sea. It's hypnotic in a terrible way. You start to drift, not to sleep exactly, but to a state of detached disbelief. Your brain whispers things like, maybe this is fine, even though it clearly isn't. Night falls, the sky turns a deep, endless black, and the stars appear cold and distant like spectators to your suffering. The temperature drops, your clothes cling to you, heavy and damp. The Vikings seem immune to the cold, their breath fogging in the air as they row tirelessly. You can tell if they were superhuman or just too stubborn to acknowledge frostbite. One of the captives beside you whispers, "They'll sell us." You don't respond because what's there to say? It's true. You're a cargo now, measured not by name but by market value. Somewhere, someone will haggle over you like you're a particularly unappealing goat. Eventually, exhaustion wins. You lean against the hull, half asleep, half frozen, lulled by the motion of the sea and the rhythmic splash of oars. You dream of land, warmth, and bread that doesn't double as a weapon. When dawn breaks, the horizon glows pale gold. Land rises in the distance, jagged cliffs, dark forests, a smear of smoke from unseen fires. The Vikings cheer. You just groan softly because you've learned enough to know that wherever you're going, it is not good. The ship turns toward shore, the oars pulling harder now. You brace yourself as it scrapes against sand and rock, the sound echoing like a closing door. One by one, the captives are dragged out, blinking into the pale northern light. You step onto the cold ground legs, shaking, heart numb, hair now an abstract art piece of salt and despair. Behind you, the longship looms like a monster that swallowed you whole and spit you out somewhere colder, hungrier, and far from everything you once knew. Congratulations, you've survived the journey. Unfortunately, it is just the beginning. As the ship cuts through freezing waves, you're tied beside a sack of dried fish which, insultingly, is treated better than you. Every splash of seawater hits your face like nature as a way of saying, "Welcome to Scandinavia." The horizon is endless, and so is your nausea. The first thing you notice, no one cares that you are miserable. The Vikings row with the grim cheerfulness of people who genuinely enjoy Arm Day. You, on the other hand, are learning the delicate balance of not throwing up while also trying not to drown in your own sadness. If this were a cruise, the reviews would be terrible. 1 star, too much seawater, no buffet. Crew was very stabby. Let us talk about seating, or rather, the complete lack of it. You're sitting on planks that have never heard of ergonomics. Every time the boat hits a wave, the wood finds a new vertebra to bully. The only cushioning is the occasional clump of wet seaweed, which offers emotional support but very little else. The dried fish next to you gets its own little spot tucked securely and lovingly. You wonder if they named it. Your wrists are tightly bound, not in the fun, high-trust way couples brag about, but the if you sneeze wrong, you'll lose circulation way. The rope rubs your skin raw, the salt stings, and you've developed a philosophical hatred of knots. You imagine a future in which you are free and dedicated entirely to inventing scissors. Let's talk sights and sounds. The sea stretches to forever, rolling in shades of greyish blue that would look peaceful if you were not emotionally melting. Seagulls scream overhead, sounding like unpaid interns forced to be here. The Vikings themselves hum or chant as they row. It's rhythmic, gutter-medic, and a little catchy like a Viking version of sea shanty ASMR, but with more mortal peril. The language, whether sung or shouted, is impossible to understand. You start to invent translations to keep yourself awake. You decide the chorus probably means row harder or perish. Lots of Viking inspiration boils down to some variation of that. As the hours stretch on, the routine becomes strange and hypnotic. Row, splash, shout, splash. You drift between fear, boredom, and the kind of existential pondering normally reserved for late-night grocery store trips. Why am I here? What is my purpose? Why does everything smell like herring? Speaking of smells, your new life is basically one big odor collage. Imagine mixing leather, sweat, seawater, fish, wet wool, and a hint of guy who hasn't used soap in a decade. Now heat that gently in the sun. That's your world now. You wonder if a Viking cologne would be called something like Ode to Axe. At some point, a Viking hands out ale. You're not sure if this is an act of kindness or a practical solution to keep captives too tipsy to think about jumping overboard. You try to sip, but drinking on a violently shaking boat is like trying to solve a Rubik's Cube during an earthquake. Most of it ends up on your tunic anyway. Congratulations, now you smell like a tavern fought a wave and lost. Every so often, a Viking barks orders, and the oarsmen change rhythm. You try to interpret their mood from their tone. Sometimes they sound triumphant, sometimes annoyed, sometimes like someone stole their favourite goat. This is your new game. Guess that Viking emotion, and let's be honest, they all look like murderous enthusiasm. Night is somehow worse. The cold slides under your clothes like it owns the place. The stars stare down in judgment, looking just close enough to remind you that you're extremely small and extremely doomed. The Vikings keep rowing, apparently immune to temperature, discomfort, or the concept of rest. You try to sleep a little, wedged between the fish and another captive who keeps whispering that he's going to be sold to Dublin. You don't know where Dublin is, but judging by his tone, it is not Cancun. Every time you drift off, a wave smacks you in the face, as if the sea is personally offended that you are trying to relax. Your lower back becomes a battleground. Your legs are numb. You try shifting positions, but your captors prefer you in the quiet and compliant posture. At one point you attempt to stretch, and a Viking gives you a look that translates to stop that or I'll use you as a seat cushion. Let S talk nutrition. The Vikings occasionally toss you something vaguely edible, sometimes fish, sometimes bread that could double as masonry. It is like dining at a minimalist restaurant where the theme is survival. You chew slowly, not because you want to savour it, but because your jaw is the only part of you that isn't exhausted. The days blur. Land appears every now and then just to tease you. Little patches of coastline, villages, forests, places you will 100 not be visiting, because you have a strict appointment with enslavement somewhere north. The ship just keeps going, tireless, like a gym bro who ignores all posted advice about rest days. Eventually you stop feeling afraid and start feeling resigned. Your cargo's slightly more vocal than a barrel, slightly less valuable than an actual barrel. The Vikings treat you exactly how you'd treat a suspiciously damp sack. Keep it tied up, assume it is fine, don't let it roll off. One particularly energetic wave slaps you in the face and leaves seaweed stuck to your forehead. A Viking laughs. You consider charging rent for the kelp, then remember you aren't illegally a person right now. In your old life, you feared things like running out of food or stepping on a sharp rock. Now you fear drowning, starvation, hypothermia, and that one Viking who keeps humming creepily while staring at you. Growth. Still, you survive because humans are stubborn, like root vegetables or people who still own fax machines. The ship sails on. The oars dip, the horizon stretches, and you discover that even as cargo, you can dream. Usually about land, sometimes about dry socks. Eventually you understand the truth of your new existence. You're not a guest. You're not a prisoner with rights. You're inventory, and the sea doesn't care. You try to focus on not vomiting into your bindings, but the motion of the ship is relentless. You consider that maybe you should have appreciated your old life, even the neighbor who played the lute badly. Now you'd give anything for dry land and mediocre music. At first, you tell yourself this is temporary, just a few hours, maybe a day. Then you notice the Vikings' expressions, the relaxed, unbothered calm of men who could row for eternity. That's when the despair starts to seep in. You're not on a short trip. You're on a journey that feels like someone put your stomach in a washing machine and threw away the off button. The waves roll beneath the longship like the heartbeat of some enormous, uncaring god. Every rise and fall tosses your insides around until you're not sure which way gravity works anymore. You try breathing slowly, in through the nose, out through the mouth, but all that accomplishes is letting more salt air in, and now you can taste the ocean, which feels like drinking soup made of sadness. You're not the only one suffering. Around you, other captives have surrendered to seasickness as cruel embrace. One man has gone fully green, another sits with his eyes closed, whispering a mantra that may or may not just be "please stop." The woman beside you, clearly a veteran of bad travel, stares at the horizon with the 1,000-yard glare of someone who's made peace with her internal organs' rebellion. The Vikings, meanwhile, are thriving, laughing, singing, occasionally swigging ale as though the North Sea is just their personal bathtub. You hate them for it. You hate their balance, their cheer, and their ability to keep food inside their bodies. One of them, noticing your distress, offers you a chunk of dried fish. You decline by gagging politely. The ship creaks with every wave, its timbers flexing and groaning like it's alive and mildly annoyed. You cling to anything solid, which, unfortunately, is another captive who doesn't appreciate being used as a stability aid. The smell of salt and fish mixes with sweat and despair until it forms an atmosphere you could practically chew. Somewhere in the middle of your misery, your brain starts asking questions, the kind that only come to you when you're trapped, helpless, and queasy. Is this punishment? Will I ever see home again? Why does seawater taste like old pennies? These are not helpful questions, but they are all you have. You think about your old life, the small hut with the leaky roof, the smell of bread baking, your friend who always borrowed things and never returned them. At the time, it all seemed unbearably dull. But compared to this, the nausea, the cold spray, the feeling that your soul has taken up residence in your shoes, dullness sounds divine. You'd sell your freedom for 5 minutes on dry land and a cup of anything not sloshing. Your thoughts spiral, as thoughts tend to do when paired with hunger and motion sickness. You start wondering what your life even means now. Are you still you, or just a number, a price tag in a Viking-esque inventory? Does existence still count when you're tied up and constantly vibrating? And more importantly, does anyone, anywhere, have a bucket? You try to distract yourself by watching the sea. Bad idea. The endless waves roll like liquid mountains, rising and collapsing with cruel rhythm. You fix your eyes on the horizon, thinking it'll help. It doesn't. The horizon is also moving, taunting you like a smug piece of scenery that knows you'll never reach it. One of the Vikings begins a chant, deep, steady, rhythmic. It's supposed to keep their rowing synchronized, but to your ears it sounds like a funeral dirge. Maybe yours. You close your eyes, trying to pretend it's as soothing, like a lullaby for people who don't mind drowning. The sky darkens, wind picks up, and soon you're being baptized again violently by the North Sea. Waves slap the ship, spray drenching everything and everyone. The Vikings whoop and cheer, because apparently near-death experiences are their version of karaoke night. You just hold on, praying your stomach doesn't betray you in front of people who think vomiting is weakness. Time loses meaning. The nausea fades into a dull, exhausted ache. You've passed through every stage of seasickness denial, bargaining, despair, and the final one, apathy. You stop caring about dignity. You stop caring about your hair, your clothes, your hopes, your dreams. If someone told you this voyage would last forever, you'd simply nod and say, "Fine." Then through the haze you hear laughter. A Viking points to a pod of dolphins darting alongside the ship. They leap and twist through the waves, graceful and free, the exact opposite of you, who is neither of those things. The contrast is poetic if you weren't too nauseous to appreciate poetry. At some point, exhaustion drags you into a shallow, uncomfortable sleep. The boat rocks, the sea whispers, and you dream of standing still, no motion, no water, no nausea, just stillness. When you wake, it's still dark, and the rocking continues. Of course it does. You exhale, long and shaky. Somewhere deep inside, beneath the queasy despair and saltwater-induced trauma, a tiny voice says, "You're still alive." It's not comfort exactly, but it's a something. And as you curl against the hull, damp and dizzy, you realize you've survived the first true test of Viking captivity. Not courage, not strength, but the ability to keep your lunch where it belongs. Congratulations, you didn't die of seasickness. Now you just have to survive everything else. The coastline looms, rocky and indifferent. You're marched off the boat, dripping, shivering, and looking like a damp loaf of bread. The Vikings cheer as they unload their loot, gold, silver, and you, the least shiny prize of the bunch. The wind greets you first, sharp and wet, the kind of cold that goes through your clothes, your skin, and directly into your soul to set up a long-term residence. The sand beneath your bare feet is black and gritty, like nature's version of welcome to your villain origin story. Around you, cliffs rise like jagged teeth, and the sea crashes against them with the enthusiasm of someone trying to destroy evidence. The Vikings hop out of the ship with the energy of people who had just finished a successful shopping spree. They stretch, laugh, and slap each other on the back. You stumble behind them, trying to look less like someone who's been emotionally broken by the ocean. Spoiler, you fail. The beach is chaos. Fires are lit, spoils are sorted, and the shouts of Norsemen fill the air. You hear a few words repeated often. You assume they mean things like victory, feast, or possibly Don to lose the new slaves. You stand there, soaked and freezing, wishing you were back home arguing about turnip prices. One Viking, big, bearded, and definitely the one in charge, points at you and says something in that rolling, thunderous language. Another man laughs and tosses you a look that says, "Congratulations, you're about to become someone's problem." Before you can protest, You are pushed toward the inland path, herded with the other captives like particularly uncooperative livestock. As you walk, the smell of pine trees replaces the salt air. The ground turns to frost crunching under your feet. Everything is grey, the sky, the rocks, even the people's clothes, as if the whole place was painted in cold tones just to emphasize your misery. Occasionally you pass a cluster of wooden houses huddled together for warmth, smoke curling from their roofs. Children peek from doorways wide-eyed, whispering about the strange mud-covered foreigners who've just washed up. If you were expecting pity, think again. The locals look at you the way modern people look at expired milk, curious, slightly disgusted but not surprised. A woman spits on the ground near your feet, muttering something that probably isn't a compliment. A dog barks at you, then looks proud of itself. You, meanwhile, are trying to remember what dignity felt like. Eventually, the Vikings lead you up a slope to what appears to be a longhouse, a massive wooden building that smells of smoke, mead, and a hint of goat. Inside, it's warm but crowded. Fires burn along the centre, smoke curling toward a hole in the roof. Furs hang on the walls and benches line either side. You can tell if this is someone at home or a rustic community centre for people who collect axes. The leader, you're guessing a chieftain, sits near the fire, drinking from a horn the size of your arm. His beard is glorious. His expression says, "I own everything you see." He surveys the new arrivals with the detached interest of someone browsing livestock. His eyes linger on you for a moment, then flick away. You are not even the interesting kind of captive. You're a middle-tier merchandise. The Vikings unload their loot, silver, jewellery, bolts of cloth, the occasional holy relic for flair. The captives are presented next like an unenthusiastic talent show. Some cry, some beg. You just stand there, silently bargaining with every god you've ever heard of. You would promise almost anything right now, your freedom, your dignity, even your worst enemy's turnip farm for a hot bath and a second chance at not being kidnapped. When the introductions are done, the sorting begins. Captives are claimed, bartered, or sent off for sale. The older ones are inspected with less enthusiasm, too weak for labour. The younger, stronger ones are assessed like prize cattle. You are somewhere in between. Not too frail, not too fierce, the perfect combination of replaceable and useful. Lucky you. They tie a small rope around your neck, symbolic, humiliating, and extremely uncomfortable, and push you toward a cart. The Vikings load up their spoils, then climb aboard or walk beside, chatting happily about whatever Vikings chat about. You imagine it is mostly axes, weather, and whose cousin insulted whose beard. The cart jolts forward, creaking through the frost. You huddle in the corner, trying to keep warm with body heat and despair. Around you, the landscape unfolds: pine forests, snowy hills, distant smoke from scattered homesteads. It's a beautiful in a this-could-kill-me sort of way. You realize that for these people, this isn't a raid. It is just Tuesday. You're part of a routine loot, sale, sell, repeat. Your background noise in someone else's saga. By the time you reach the settlement proper, your hands are numb, your legs ache, and you've mentally drafted about 12 different revenge plans, all of which involve opposable thumbs and central heating, neither of which you currently have access to. The Vikings unload the cart, shouting directions. You are herded into a fenced area with the others. A man shoves a bowl of something vaguely edible into your hands. It is grey, hot, and suspiciously lumpy, but you eat it anyway because hunger has no dignity. As night falls, the settlement hums with celebration. Music, laughter, and the clinking of cups fill the air. Inside the longhouse, they feast. Outside, you and the other captives curl up against the cold. the stars glittering like uncaring witnesses above. You close your eyes, listening to the distant roar of the sea and the laughter of your captors. The ground is hard, the air bites, and yet somehow you're still here. You're not gold, you're not silver, you're just the least shiny prize in the pile. But you're a breathing, which, in this part of the world, might just count as winning. You're lined up with other captives as potential buyers stroll by, appraising you like someone inspecting used oxen. They check your teeth, your arms, your general not dying soon vibe. One of them pokes your shoulder approvingly. Congratulations, you're employable. The morning air is sharp enough to wake the dead, which, inconveniently, is a category you might soon join. The market is a muddy patch of ground framed by rough wooden stalls. Smoke from nearby fires drifts overhead, carrying the smell of salt, roasting meat, and mild despair. Vikings wander through the rows of captives with the same energy as people browsing a Saturday flea market, except instead of old pottery and questionable rugs, the merchandise is you. You try to stand tall, but your legs shake. It's not easy to look dignified when you're wearing what's essentially a sack of damp burlap and a look of existential confusion. A man with a braided beard the size of a raccoon squints at you, lifts your chin with one finger, and checks your teeth like you're a particularly suspicious horse. You consider biting him, but he's holding an axe, so you smile instead, a decision that could be described as pragmatic cowardice. To your left, a young woman is being inspected for her weaving skills. She demonstrates with trembling hands, and her captor beams like a proud employer who has just found the perfect intern who will never be paid. To your right, a man with the arms of a blacksmith and the face of someone who's seen too much is being tested for his lifting ability. They hand him a crate. He lifts it. They nod. He's hired. The process is disturbingly efficient. Behind you, the Viking traders are shouting prices. 3 silver, 2 cows, a sword and half a barrel of ale. The economy here makes no sense, but you're beginning to realize that the value of a human life is roughly equivalent to one moderately fat goat. You can't help thinking, I am worth less than dinner. The market buzzes with noise, clinking coins, laughter, bargaining, the occasional muffled sob. The buyers, mostly local farmers or chieftains, wander by with casual indifference. They're not evil, exactly just practical. They need workers. You're available. It's nothing personal. It is just medieval capitalism. Someone near the front of the line starts praying. Someone else swears. You stare blankly ahead, your mind drifting into a detached calm that might just be trauma. It's a way of saying, let me drive for a bit. You find yourself noticing strange little details, the way the sunlight glints off a Viking's bronze arm ring, the rhythmic crunch of boots in the frost, the sound of a raven croaking overhead, as if giving commentary on your life choices. Then it is your turn. A thick-armed man with a wolf pelt around his shoulders stops in front of you. His eyes are the kind of blue that belongs to people who definitely don't moisturize. He looks you up and down. Strong enough for the fields? He asks. Not to you, but to the trader. The trader nods with enthusiasm that implies a commission. You want to protest to explain that you're more of an indoor chores kind of person. Maybe a desk job, if desks existed. But all that comes out is a hoarse croak. The Viking doesn't care. He taps your shoulder again, satisfied. I'll take this one. A brief, intense negotiation follows the verbal equivalent of 2 seagulls fighting over a sandwich. Eventually, silver changes hands and your fate is sealed. You're now property of whoever this man is. He claps you on the back hard enough to make your spine consider early retirement. You'll work well, he says, as if you have any say in the matter. You are handed a small leather collar, decorative apparently. but the symbolism doesn't exactly scream freedom. Around you, the rest of the captives are similarly claimed, divided up like mismatched socks. Some cry, others just stare ahead, hollow-eyed. You to comfort them, but you can barely comfort yourself. By midday, the market is winding down. The crowd thins, the fires die low, and the remaining unsold captives are loaded back onto carts, presumably for the next market or for parts unknown. You, however, are marched toward a waiting horse. The man who bought you your new master, though the word makes you physically ill, ties a rope around your wrists and attaches the other end to his saddle. As the caravan starts moving, you look back at the market one last time. It is quiet now, almost peaceful. The stalls stand empty, the ground trampled, the air thick with the faint metallic tang of exchanged silver. Somewhere, a Viking hums a cheerful tune, because for them this was a profitable day. For you, it was a job interview where failure wasn't an option, because technically, you got the job. You're led away down a narrow path that winds through pine forests and frost-covered fields. The rope tugs at your wrist with each step, reminding you that every moment now belongs to someone else. The sun dips low, painting the sky a cruel, beautiful gold. You take a deep breath, trying to steady yourself, but the air tastes of smoke and endings. You're no longer a villager, no longer free. You're an investment, a line on a ledger, and as the wind howls through the trees, you can't help thinking that somewhere, someone is probably haggling over your exact worth in goats. Your new master introduces himself with a grunt that could mean hello or don't touch my goats. The man is built like someone took a tree trunk, gave it feelings, and then immediately took those feelings away again. His beard is the star of the show, long, thick, possibly sentient. It sways when he walks, like it's whispering ancient insults about your posture. His eyes are hidden somewhere behind all that hair, but when he looks at you, you feel judged on every life choice you've ever made, including your current choice to simply continue breathing. He gestures for you to follow, which you interpret as obey or perish. Vikings aren't known for subtlety. You shuffle behind him, wrists bound, stumbling over roots and small rocks. Olaf, because his name might as well be Olaf, walks with slow confidence, as though deeply aware that no one in a 10-mile radius could possibly challenge him without becoming part of the local compost. As you walk, he attempts conversation. At least you think it's conversation. He says something in Old Norse that sounds like a threat, a greeting, or possibly a recipe for fish stew. You nod politely. Nodding seems safe. He nods back, apparently satisfied that you've just agreed to something legally binding. His farm appears after a short trek. A cluster of wooden structures huddled together like they were gossiping. There is a longhouse, a barn, a smaller shed, and several confused chickens. Smoke curls lazily from the roof hole of the longhouse. It smells like stew, sweat, and disappointment. Olaf gestures to the door. You follow him inside and immediately realize why everyone smells like a smoked ham. The longhouse is warm, yes, but also smoky enough to make your eyes water. Fires burn low along the middle, the smoke finding its way out through the ceiling hole when it's feeling ambitious. On either side of the room are benches covered with furs, places for sleeping, eating, and pretending life isn't awful. A woman approaches, tall, broad-shouldered, eyes sharp enough to cut bread. She looks you over like she is inspecting a stray dog her husband has dragged home. Olaf grunts again, and she responds with her own grunt. You are now 90 sure they communicate entirely through the power of guttural noises and mutual understanding. It is strangely intimate. The woman hands you a cup of something warm, watery broth that tastes like someone once thought about vegetables while boiling water. You drink gratefully anyway. Your hands shake from cold and fear. She notices, frowns, and throws a fur at you with the accuracy of a catapult. You wrap it around yourself, instantly warmer, slightly less miserable. As introductions go, this is better than expected. No one has yelled at you yet. No one has hit you. Olaf just sits on a stool, staring at you like he's deciding where you fit in his grand cosmic plan of goats, grain, and grunting. Eventually, he points toward a shadowy corner of the longhouse. A pallet of straw waits there, lumpy, itchy, better than the floor. That, he says, in a tone universally recognized as your new bed. You settle onto the straw. It pokes you in places straw should not poke, but it's warm, and you're too exhausted to complain. Olaf watches for a moment, nods once, then returns to whatever Vikings do when they're not raiding, probably thinking about raiding. A few minutes later, you meet the rest of the household. A boy of about 12 who stares at you like you're an exotic bug. A girl a few years younger who giggles every time Olaf grunts, which is often. And a dog, huge, silent fur-like winter clouds. He sniffs you with mild interest, decides you're boring and walks away. The family eats. You serve. They talk. You listen. The language barrier is thick, but you begin to pick out patterns. Gestures for food, work. Don't put that near the fire or we'll all perish. Olaf speaks mostly in short phrases. The others fill the silence with stories that roll and rise like river water. You don't know what they were saying, but their laughter tells you it's definitely more fun than your life. When dinner ends, Olaf takes out a knife and begins cleaning it with slow, habitual precision. The firelight flickers across his face, turning him into a myth, a man carved from darkness and light. You realize he's dangerous, yes, but not cruel for sport. He is a force of nature like winter or taxes. As you lie in your straw corner that night, drifting towards sleep, you hear Olaf snoring. Loudly, rhythmic, comforting, in a strange, this man could crush me sort of way. You pull the fur tighter and let your mind settle. You're no longer free. You belong to Olaf, but and this surprises you, there are worse people to belong to. Tomorrow will be hard. You'll work, sweat, obey. But tonight, you sleep in a warm house under a warm roof, and no one is shouting or rowing or dying. And in this new life of low expectations, that almost feels like a win. You're given a corner of the longhouse to sleep in right next to the goats, which feels less like welcome to the family and more like please don't touch anything valuable. The goats stare at you as if you're the strange one, which is fair, given that you've recently been transported across the sea as unwilling luggage. Your designated sleeping nook is a cozy rectangle of straw and despair, tucked between a support beam and a goat pen. The straw looks like it was harvested sometime around the fall of Rome, and it feels like it has held every unpleasant secret since. Still, it's dryish, warmish, and you're tired enough to consider anything horizontal a blessing. The longhouse itself is one big communal space. A family room, kitchen, bedroom, workshop, and barn, all crammed into a wooden rectangle that smells like smoke, sweat, stew, and animal opinions. The central fire burns steadily, sending curls of smoke up toward the ceiling hole. Sometimes the smoke finds it, sometimes it finds your lungs. It is, in that sense, a deeply personal experience. Your corner has exactly 3 features: straw, a small wooden bowl, and the goat who keeps looking at you like it's deciding whether to chew on your blanket or your dignity first. You name the goat Harold because you need at least one living thing here you can call by a name you understand. Harold does not reciprocate the emotional bond. Let us talk about warmth. The longhouse is heated by the central hearth, a heart of fire that does its best to fight the biting northern cold. But heat distribution is uneven. If you're near the fire, you're bathed in cozy warmth and mild smoke inhalation. If you were on the outskirts, i.e., you were treated to a balmy mixture of cold drafts and the warm breath of livestock. Half of your body is freezing, the other half smells like goat. It's a lifestyle. The noise is constant. If it isn't the crackle of the fire or the whisper of wind sneaking through the timber, it's the low snoring of half a dozen Vikings and the occasional enthusiastic bleat from Harold. Someone shifts, someone scratches, someone snores so deeply you wonder if they are summoning subterranean spirits. You will never again complain about your neighbour-s leaf blower. This is the Sleep Olympics, and you are losing. Occasionally, Olaf's children race through the hall, shouting and playing some inexplicable Norse game involving sticks and enthusiastic shrieking. You flinch every time, convinced you're about to be drafted into a sport you don't understand. They ignore you, which is somehow worse. Your first night, you lie awake listening to the house, breathe wood creaking, fire crackling, rafters settling under the weight of old snow. The smell of cooking lingers in the air. Onion, fish, maybe meat. You are hungry, but the day has wrung your strength dry, leaving only a dull ache behind your ribs and a brain too tired to panic. Eventually, you start to notice the rhythm. The longhouse sleeps. Early wakes early. After dinner, the family sprawls onto their benches and furs, gathering in proximity to warmth and each other. People settle in quiet clumps, family together. Guests closer to the fire, thralls and animals at the fringe. You are fringe. You will always be fringe. You try to get comfortable. You shift. You rearrange straw. You try lying on your back, then your side, then your other side. The straw pokes new places each time, like it is conducting a structural examination of your bones. You grumble quietly. Harold bleats smugly. At some point, Olaf's wife passes by and places another small fur at your feet. She doesn't speak, just sets it down and walks away. It is not kindness exactly, more like practicality. A half-frozen thrall is useless. Still, the unexpected gesture warms you more than the fur does. Through the night, the air cools. The fire burns low, leaving the longhouse in a flickering twilight of embers. Shadows stretch along the floor, curling around boots, benches, and sleeping bodies. You pull both furs around you and curl tighter, trying to make yourself smaller, less noticeable, less vulnerable. The goats settle, their soft chewing becoming strangely soothing. You consider talking to Harold, maybe confiding in him about your hopes and dreams, but realize even goats have better things to do. Your mind wanders. You think of home, of your village, of the bed you once complained was too lumpy. You trade the contents of this entire longhouse minus Harold to have that lumpy bed again. You think of the people you lost, the ones you might never see again. Waves of grief come and go. They hurt, but you are too exhausted to resist them. And still, despite the cold, the fear, the overwhelming homesickness, you fall asleep. Because your body demands it. Because the day has emptied you. Because sometimes sleep isn't a choice, it is surrender. You dream of warm sunlight, soft grass, and bread. You dream of a life that feels impossibly far away. When morning comes announced by Olaf's signature motivational grunting, you awaken stiff, cold, and confused. Harold is chewing your blanket. Your bowl is missing. Someone definitely stepped on your leg at some point. Welcome to the thrallless quarters, cramped, smoky, and goat-adjacent. It isn't much. But it's your home now. Forget snoozing alarms. Olaf wakes everyone by shouting something motivational in Norse and slamming doors for emphasis. You don't understand his words, but the tone is unmistakable. Rise and shine, or I will personally introduce you to the business end of this axe. It's not exactly inspirational, but it gets you moving. Well, technically you jerk awake, panic, then try to stand while tangled in furs and straw. Harold the goat watches your struggle with the smug calm of someone who has never worked a day in his life. The longhouse shifts from half-conscious groaning to full activity in seconds. Olaf's wife stirs the hearth fire to life, sending more. Smoke swirling upward and sideways and directly into your face. The air becomes richer with warmth and irritation. Olaf's children sit up, rubbing their eyes, stretching, and immediately launching into a game that involves leaping across benches with no regard for your fragile existence. You join the other thralls, a couple of tired, mud-streaked people whose spirits seem permanently set to low battery. There's no chatting. Conversation takes energy, and energy is a finite resource reserved for lifting heavy things and not dying. You simply exchange nods of solidarity that say, "We are still alive," mildly disappointing, but acceptable. First task, water. You and another thrall trudge outside to fetch it from a stream. The morning air is cold enough to freeze your regrets. You clutch wooden buckets and try to ignore that your feet are currently numb, as though they've chosen to resign from your body in protest. Frost clings to grass and wood, glittering under a pale sunrise that does absolutely nothing to raise the temperature. The walk to the stream is both quiet and perilous. You trip on roots, slip on frost, and swear quietly so as not to offend any old Norse deities who might be bored and vengeful. Birds chirp overhead, but in that judgmental way, they were wondering why you were awake when sensible creatures are still nesting. You reach the stream, dip the buckets, and instantly lose sensation in your hands. The water bites with the enthusiasm of 1,000 tiny winter demons. You think of bathtubs back home lukewarm, soap optional, but not actively hostile. The nostalgia nearly knocks you over. Back inside, the longhouse is louder. Olaf is telling a story, something involving a bear, a storm, and perhaps someone named Bjorn who definitely made bad choices. You don't follow the details, but every few words spark laughter from the family. You smile weakly, attempting to blend in. No one asks your opinion, no one needs it. Breakfast appears in the form of gruel. Again, a thick grey paste ladled into bowls, steaming faintly. It looks like someone tried to make porridge but got bored halfway through. Still, it's warm and tastes faintly of oats and survival. You eat in silence, savouring the warmth spreading down your throat, reminding you that you are, unfortunately, still alive. Olaf eats like a man at war, quickly, decisively, occasionally pointing at things with his spoon. His wife listens, nodding, occasionally countering with her own spoon arguments. The children inhale their food and run outside to shout at trees or something equally educational. You finish last, scraping every bit from the bowl because calories are happiness now. Next, chores. You begin your day with churning butter. If you've ever churned butter before, congratulations, you're more prepared than 98 of the population. If you haven't, imagine repeatedly shaking a heavy container filled with dairy while contemplating every mistake that led you here. It is both physically exhausting and philosophically enlightening. You churn and churn and churn. The churn becomes your whole personality. You pause only when Olaf assigns your next task, hauling wood. Apparently Vikings love wood. They burn it, carve it, stack it, and use it to reinforce their personalities. You drag logs from a pile outside to the storage shed. Each log weighs approximately 1 despair unit. By the time you finish, your arms feel like overcooked noodles, and you are fairly certain your spine has filed a complaint. Then, laundry. Because even Vikings like cleanish shirts, except this is done at the same freezing stream you visited earlier. You kneel in the mud, dipping fabric into icy water. slapping it against rocks while praying your fingers don't break off. The wind chaps your face, the goats judge your technique. Harold wanders by, bleats unhelpfully and continues on. After laundry, it's time to clean the longhouse, sweeping dirt and straw into piles, dumping ashes, smoothing out furs. You find yourself doing tasks you never imagined doing while kidnapped. You wipe down benches and straighten cooking tools, thinking, is this my life now? Am I housekeeping? Yes, you are. By midday, your entire body aches, your hair smells like smoke, your hands are red and numb. You have no idea what time it is. The sun is vaguely overhead, so somewhere between too early and still too early. Olaf calls for a break. You sit outside and stare at the forest, chewing on crusty bread that could double as a weapon. Despite everything, the labor, the cold, the constant threat of further humiliation, you feel a strange calm. Your body is too tired to panic. Your mind drifts. You watch clouds drift across the sky, lazily indifferent to human suffering. You briefly imagine running away, but remember that you don't know where you are, where to go, or how to fight wolves with only bread. So you stay. You breathe. You chew bread. You wait for Olaf to grunt again. This is the original 5 a.m. club. Wake up early, work hard, achieve nothing but survival. No inspirational quotes, no business advice, no morning smoothie. Just toil, sore muscles, and the distant hope that someday you'll graduate from thrall to slightly more useful thrall. And despite it all, the day goes on. Because here, that's all you can do. Survive. And maybe pet the goat when no one else looking. Breakfast is a greyish porridge that tastes like punishment and oatmeal had a fight. You eat it anyway, because starvation isn't a great look. From your luxurious sleeping nook beside Harold the goat, you shuffle toward the central hearth, where a battered iron pot hangs like an overworked employee praying for retirement. Inside, the morning masterpiece. If you've ever wondered what sadness looks like when ladled into a bowl, this is it: thick, lukewarm, slightly congealed, and surrounded by an aroma that whispers, this is fuel, not joy. Olaf's wife stirs the gruel with a spoon the size of a small canoe paddle. She serves it without ceremony, sliding bowls across the table with the precision of someone who absolutely does not care if you enjoy this experience. You receive your portion, a dull grey mass that somehow manages to steam without being warm. It jiggles ominously. You sit. You stare. You try to convince yourself that heat is a concept rather than a requirement. Then you take a bite. It clings to your tongue like a bad memory. The texture is both gritty and slimy, which should be impossible, and yet here you are, living the dream. Your brain whispers, "Don't think about it," so you stop thinking altogether. Problem solved. To be fair, historically speaking, this is pretty normal. Thralls didn't get eggs or toasted rye bread or whatever version of avocado toast existed in the 9th century. Probably just an avocado, if you were unbelievably lucky. You get nutrition in its purest, most uninspired form. Think medieval soylent, but more depressing. The Vikings eat too, though with marginally more enthusiasm. For them, this is simple fuel before a long day of chopping wood, herding animals, hammering metal, or occasionally raiding your neighbours and stealing their futures. They gulp down their bowls quickly, not fussing about flavour profiles or texture. No one asks if the seasoning is balanced. No one cares. This is breakfast, not brunch. The children eat loudly, slurping, laughing, launching globules of porridge at each other when their mother's back is turned. You try to maintain dignity, but dignity left days ago, probably back at the monastery or farm you once called home. Instead, you focus on not dropping your wooden spoon. Harold the goat eyes your bowl with profound interest, chewing thoughtfully on a piece of hay. You can tell if he's judging you or wants a taste. Curiosity compels you. You hold out a bit of porridge. He sniffs, looks offended, and turns away. When a goat refuses your food, you know you've hit culinary rock bottom. A Viking across the table watches you attempt to eat with the wide-eyed horror usually reserved for first-time parents. He grunts something that might be encouragement. His beard holds yesterday's crumbs as if hoarding for winter. He taps his bowl approvingly, so you mimic him not because you agree, but because pretending might save your hide. Halfway through your bowl, you begin to experience something not unlike acceptance. Yes, breakfast tastes like someone boiled sadness. Yes, you'll probably be eating this same paste every morning until Odin personally carries you home. But your body needs it, and your options are limited. Gruel or death. You choose gruel. As you scrape the last of the porridge from the sides of the bowl, you hear Olaf finish his portion with a satisfied sigh that sounds like a bear exhaling. He wipes his mouth on his sleeve, because napkins are for the weak and overly civilized. Then he stands, stretches, and announces something in Norse that is absolutely not. Take the morning off. You sense that this marks the end of today's dining experience. The bowls are gathered and rinsed with water cold enough to insult your ancestors. Some of the leftover porridge, yes, there is leftover, somehow is fed to the pigs. Even the pigs hesitate before eating it. Despite the bleakness of it all, you find yourself grateful for the meal. It might not be delicious, warming, textured, spicy, or enjoyable in any recognizable way, but it keeps you alive. And here, staying alive is the closest thing to winning. As everyone disperses to begin daily chores, you linger over your empty bowl for a brief second, reflecting on the fact that you've just eaten something less flavorful than wet paper. Still, it was your breakfast, and that means you're starting the day fueled if only slightly. You stand, wipe your mouth with the back of your hand, Viking etiquette, and join the others as Olaf grunts instructions. The air outside is sharp, crisp, and full of obligations. So begins another day in your new life, fueled by oats, powered by fear, and haunted by the knowledge that tomorrow's breakfast will be exactly the same. On the bright side, you'll never again complain about mediocre coffee. You're sent to the fields, handed a hoe, and told to dig until your soul leaves your body. The work is endless, the weather unpredictable, and the only motivation you have is avoid getting yelled at again. The Viking fields look deceptively peaceful. Rolling earth dotted with stubbly crops, ringed by forests that whisper things like, yes, wolves live here, and they are hungry. But once you step in, peace leaves the chat. The ground is uneven, the soil is cold and stubborn, and your new hoe feels less like a tool and more like a device designed to slowly reduce you to emotional dust. Olaf points to a patch of earth the size of a soccer field. He grunts something that you interpret as, turn this dirt into food, and don ti die. Then he leaves, because nothing encourages productivity like abandonment. You start digging. At first, you treat it like exercise nice and steady, pretending you paid for this, that it is all part of some new Scandinavian wellness routine. Within minutes, your lower back begins to write complaint letters to your brain. Your arms, meanwhile, burn with the fury of someone who regrets every bowl of gruel that brought them here. Let us talk about posture. You have none. The hoe requires bending in ways that feel specifically engineered to make future generations pay for physical therapy. You try to stand straight, but the soil sucks you downward. Soon your back is curved like a shrimp, and your wrists scream in a language older than Old Norse. Beside you, another thrall works rhythmically, as though possessed by the spirit of a Viking peloton instructor. He offers no mentorship, only a blank stare that says, "You think this is hard? Wait until hay season." The sky can decide on a mood. Some days it spits rain, cold enough to make your teeth rattle like dice in the hands of an enthusiastic gambler. Other days the sun bakes you until your sweat smells like regret and barnyard. The wind is always there, needling you, flipping your hair into your face like you've angered a mischievous weather god. Every once in a while, Olaf checks in. He doesn't smile, Vikings don't smile. They grin when violence is imminent, but that's different. He nods at your progress, then casually digs twice as much as you in a tenth of the time, like he's trying to remind you that your muscles are comparatively decorative. At midday, you're allowed a brief break. This is not a lunch break because lunch implies edible joy. You get a heel of bread that could double as a building material, and a ladle of water that tastes faintly of metal and sorrow. You sit under a tree, chewing through the bread like someone trying to process emotional trauma with carbs. The view around you is almost insulting in its beauty, forests of tall pines, mountains in the distance, skies spattered with clouds. Birds glide lazily overhead. You look down at your blistered palms and wheezing chest and think, nature is mocking me. After lunch, if we can call it that, you get back to work. Your hoe digs relentlessly, carving lines through the earth. Each swing feels heavier. The soil becomes your nemesis. Rocks emerge like tiny goblins sent to ruin your day. You remove them, cursing every geology class you never took. Occasionally, livestock wander by: sheep, cows, a bored chicken. They judge you. All animals here judge you. You try not to take it personally, but it's hard when a chicken looks at your form and silently decides it could do better. Sometimes you catch yourself daydreaming. You imagine running away, sprinting into the forest of freedom until you remember you have the cardio capacity of a damp rag and zero wilderness skills. Also, wolves. So you refocus on hoeing, your safest option. By late afternoon, your body has entered what athletes call the zone, and regular people call I no longer feel feelings. You are numb, swinging the hoe mechanically, existing somewhere between consciousness and compost. Time has no meaning, only dirt. Eventually, Olaf calls it. He grunts his daily benediction stop and you collapse inside, sweat-soaked and caked with mud. Your muscles vibrate like there's a processing trauma. You inhale deeply, catching the faint scent of pine and personal failure. Back at the longhouse, you drop the hoe. It clatters loudly, like a small metal victory cry. Your hands are raw, blistered, and covered in enough dirt to start a modest pottery business. You stare at them, wondering if they'll ever be clean again, or if you're destined to have hands that look like they've lived 4 extra lives. Olaf strides past, nodding once. Approval? Maybe. Or maybe he's just acknowledging that you didn't die today. In Viking culture, that is practically a standing ovation. You shuffle inside for supper, shoulders heavy, feet numb. You smell like earth, sweat, and desperation. And yet, as you lean against the longhouse wall, gulping down water, you realize something strange. You survived. You worked a field in the middle of nowhere like someone who meant it. You didn't collapse or run or get eaten by wolves. You didn't even throw the hoe at Olaf, though you considered it. Sure, you ache everywhere. Sure, tomorrow will be the same. But today, you proved that even as a thrall kidnapped, exhausted, underfed, you can endure. Fieldwork. It is not CrossFit. It is not Soul Cycle. It is not even regular farm labor. It is gym membership by force. All pain. No gain. No cancellation policy. But hey, your biceps are coming along nicely. Laundry day means kneeling by a freezing river, slapping tunics against rocks while pretending this counts as spa therapy. In the sagas, heroes wrestle sea serpents, battle giants, and survive voyages across the world. You're about to square up against a growing pile of soiled wool tunics that smell like they've seen war, spilled ale, and at least one bad life decision. You may not be in a heroic saga, but this is still an epic, just an incredibly boring and damp one. Olaf hands you a bundle of laundry so large it could qualify for citizenship. It is heavy, dripping, and radiates a stench best described as adventure mixed with disappointment. He gestures toward the river with a grunt that means, clean this, and maybe, don't to come back until you've achieved something. So, off you go, trudging down a narrow path through pine trees. The air is crisp in the way that makes your nose immediately consider freezing off. The river ahead gurgles innocently, like it didn't just form a pact with winter to ruin your hands. Mist hangs over the surface, and if you squint hard enough, you might imagine some magical creature emerging to offer warmth and hot cider. It will not. You are alone with the laundry. You kneel on a flat rock that is somehow colder than the water, and begin. Step 1. Soak the tunic. You dunk the garment into the river, instantly losing all feeling in your fingers. You gasp, realizing you've just encountered water so cold it could file for assault. The wool becomes a heavy, sodden beast, and you drag it from the water like a defeated kraken. Step 2. Slap vigorously. This is the part you saw other thralls do with practiced dignity. You swing the tunic and smack it against the rock again and again. This sound echoes across the river valley like a passive-aggressive drum solo. Splat, splat, splat. It's therapy, if your therapist is a chunk of granite. And your deepest emotional wound is a tunic with questionable stains. You scrub with something that claims to be soap but looks more like sadness in bar form. It smells faintly of ash and herbs, the kind of product Gwyneth Paltrow would market as forest essence and sell for too much. You lather, rinse, slap, repeat. Other thralls join you. There's the older woman who does this in grim silence, her arms corded with muscle and resentment. There's the younger boy who hums a folk song that absolutely does not improve your mood. You try humming too, but your teeth are chattering so violently it turns into a Morse code transmission spelling send heat. As you work, your mind drifts. You think about laundry from your previous life, the warm water, the pleasant soap, the fact that the washing didn't involve possible hypothermia or wolves. You remember complaining about folding clothes. Folding. You would now fold 1,000 shirts for the chance to dip your hands into water that wasn't trying to murder you. The river flows steadily, swirling icy currents around your ankles. Eventually, you give up on trying to stay dry and accept your fate. You will leave here soaked, cold, and smelling faintly of despair, but cleaner despair. That progress. Rinsing is the hardest part. You dunk and wring until your hands feel like damp wood. The tunic weighs approximately the same as a small horse. You twist it with trembling arms, silently screaming at the sky. The sky does not care. When you finish the first tunic, you celebrate internally. Then you look at the pile beside you and realize you've completed approximately 4 of your assigned chore. If life were a video game, this would be the side quest that never ends and gives you no XP. Hours pass, or maybe minutes. Time has melted into suffering. You line the wet garments on the bank to dry, which is optimistic language considering the sun is barely trying. The tunics lie limply on the grass like defeated warriors waiting for Valhalla's laundry service. Sometimes Olaf wanders by, nodding as if to say, "Good, you're still cold." He offers no help, no warm beverage, not even a thumbs up. Vikings don't thumbs up. They grunt approvingly, which he does. Then he leaves. When you've finally finished the pile, you gather the tunic's now half-frozen planks of wool and carry them home like cold, damp trophies. The path feels longer on the return, but at least you're too numb to feel your legs. Back at the longhouse, you drape the garments near the fire to dry. The air fills with a mingling scent of smoke, wet wool, and your dying optimism. You tuck yourself into your corner, trying to warm your hands near the flames. The feeling returns slowly, painfully, like each finger is waking from a terrible dream. Olaf's wife inspects your work. She nods once the Viking household equivalent of a 5-star Yelp review. You feel absurdly proud. You have survived Viking laundry. Later, as you curl into your straw bed, you reflect. You wrestled wool in freezing water. You slapped clothing against rocks like an angry river bard. You exfoliated your hands against nature, and somehow you lived. In another life, you'd have paid good coin for this as a rustic spa retreat, glacier water, textile therapy. Here, it is just Tuesday, and tomorrow, more laundry, more river, more numb fingers. This is the saga no skald sings about, but you are living it anyway, one icy tunic at a time. The Vikings bathe more than most medieval folk, which sounds promising until you realize it involves a shared wooden tub, questionable water, and the faint hope that your skin won't fall off afterward. Bath day arrives with all the pageantry of a tax audit. Someone cheerfully announces that it's time to wash, and suddenly every member of the household starts gathering buckets, herbs, and a tub that looks like it once held pickled fish. Your heart lifts for a split second. Finally, cleanliness, civilization, before reality clarifies that you're about to marinate in lukewarm people broth. Let us set the stage. The tub is placed inside the longhouse near the fire. Privacy, not a thing. Vikings consider modesty a charming Roman myth, like indoor plumbing or not stabbing your enemies on Sundays. The water is heated in big cauldrons until it's just hot enough to sting your fingers, but not hot enough to kill whatever was living in it beforehand. When the tub is filled, the family bathes first. Rank matters. Olaf climbs in like he's returning to his ancestral hot spring. He scrubs his beard with the satisfaction that suggests this is the highlight of his week. His children splash each other, laughing, dunking under the water like they're having the time of their lives. You watch as every flake of dirt and crumb of breakfast porridge floating on their skin becomes a tiny passenger in the bath water you will soon inherit. When the family finishes, the water looks like a witch's brew for skin diseases. Layers of grime cling to the top like some kind of medieval latte foam. Then comes your turn. Someone hands you a lumpy cloth and gestures toward the tub. You stare, trying to maintain the dignity of a houseplant being repotted. You step in. The water embraces you like a cold, damp handshake from someone who hates you. The bottom is textured. You don't want to think about why. You begin to scrub, focusing on major life areas. Arms, legs, the emotional trauma clinging to your soul. The soap, if we can call it that, smells faintly of ashen plants that probably died unwillingly. It leaves your skin feeling both cleaner and somehow more medieval. The other thralls bathe too in turns. Everyone pretends not to look at everyone else, but there is only so much pretending you can do in a one-room home where people wash 3 feet from the dinner table. Olaf occasionally walks by to grunt in approval, or toss in an herb that may or may not be mint. You try to imagine this as a spa day. You fail, sometimes if the weather is warm enough, meaning you want to instantly die. People bathe in the river instead. This is both better and worse. Better, because the water is clean and flowing. Worse because it is so cold your bones start writing farewell letters to your organs. You strip, shiver, and wade in. gasping like you've just encountered the moment of creation. The river doesn't care. It rips warmth from your body like a Viking tax collector. You scrub quickly, hurling water at yourself like purity is a full-contact sport. At least there is nature. Birds sing, pine trees sway. Sometimes a wolf watches from the tree line, deciding whether you look like lunch. Nothing brings urgency to bathing like being on the menu. When you emerge, you are pink, trembling, and alive in the technical sense. You dry yourself using some combination of stand near the fire, shake aggressively, and borrow a goat's body heat if it lets you. Clothes go back on while still damp, because this is the Viking Age luxury is for future generations and possibly very rich monks. There is no perfume, no conditioner, no scented oils. If you want to smell better, your options are stand downwind or apply herbs and pray. Some thralls braid their hair to keep it tidy. Others let it go wild, embracing the wind-tousled aesthetic of someone who lives one bad decision away from a saga tragedy. And yet somehow you feel slightly renewed. Your skin tingles. You're less sticky. You smell faintly of pine smoke, river water, and stubborn hope. In a world where survival is the goal, and glamour is not even on the list, you'll take whatever victory you can get. When night comes, you slip into your straw corner, damp but cleaner, feeling oddly lighter. Harold the goat sniffs you suspiciously, as if offended by this sudden lack of companionable filth. You close your eyes, grateful that the grime of the week has finally been defeated at least until morning chores start. Tomorrow you'll be dirty again, sweating and slogging through mud, smoke and oat paste breakfasts. But tonight, you are cleanish. You have survived the tub, and in this world that absolutely counts as self-care. Dinner is loud, smoky and full of roasted meat you're not allowed to touch. After a day spent performing unpaid CrossFit in the fields, or achieving mild frostbite while washing tunics, the sun dips low and smoke begins curling from the longhouse roof. You follow the rest of the household inside, drawn by the promise of warmth, possibly food, and at the very least the feeling of being near things that once knew food. The longhouse transforms in the evening. The central fire roars to life, its light painting everything in flickering amber. Shadows leap across the timber beams and animal hides, like dancers who skipped rehearsal. The air is thick with wood smoke and the unmistakable smell of roasting meat, glorious, savoury, delicious, and 100 off-limits to you, the thrall. Olaf and his family settle around the main fire like it's their personal VIP lounge. The good cuts of meat, the kind that could bring a grown adult to tears, are pierced on spits and rotated with reverence. Fat sizzles and drips into the flames, hissing like it knows exactly how little of it will make it to your bowl. Vikings pass the meat around, tearing off hearty bites with the same enthusiasm modern people apply to bottomless brunch. Meanwhile, you and the other thralls linger along the walls, trying and failing not to drool openly. You know your place, perimeter seating. You are present, technically invited, but only in the you may observe sustenance kind of way. It is like being backstage at a concert, except you're not performing, not eating, and not allowed to touch any instruments. Your dinner arrives. A half-hearted bowl of lukewarm stew with 2 turnips trying to disguise themselves as flavour. It's better than breakfast, but only because it is not actively insulting your tongue. You savour each bite slowly, partly because there isn't much, and partly because there is nothing else to do. Occasionally you catch the eye of someone enjoying a juicy slab of roast lamb. They do not make eye contact back. Conversation flows like ale, loud, spirited, occasionally indecipherable. Olaf tells stories while standing for maximum dramatic effect. His beard, which really should have its own legal identity at this point, sways with every grand gesture. He recounts past raids and near-death escapades, storms at sea, enemy warriors with questionable fashion choices, and one incident involving a monk who apparently fought like a bear but screamed like a goat. The entire family laughs. You laugh too, even though you understood 0% of what was said. This is survival laughter, the polite, non-threatening chuckle of someone who would like to keep all their limbs. The children run wild, weaving between benches, brandishing wooden sticks they've decided are swords. One accidentally whacks your bowl. You watch precious stew drip onto the floor as the child giggles and sprints away. You mourn silently. That turnip died for you, and now it is goat food. Speaking of goats, Harold is here. He wanders freely, sniffing for dropped morsels and enjoying more freedom of movement than you. Occasionally he bleats at the fire as if offering critique on Olaf's storytelling. You suspect Harold knows too much. Despite being on the emotional side of starving, you find yourself soaking in the absurd coziness of it all. The warmth of the fire numbs your aching limbs. The communal hum of voices lulls your brain. Vikings share mugs of ale, strong, smoky stuff that doubles as mouthwash and mild anesthesia. A few drops trickle your way, and you drink gratefully, feeling your soul briefly leave your body and return wearing a slightly warmer sweater. Then comes the entertainment. Someone begins to sing a deep, slow chant that sounds like the entire forest joined in. Another claps a rhythm on the table with knuckles thick from hammering iron. A third produces a crude lyre, plucking a tune that feels older than the mountains, is haunting, beautiful, and just the tiniest bit terrifying, like lullaby meets war cry. The music blends with the crackling fire, the smell of meat, the flickering light, and the murmured conversations. Even though you're on the outskirts, it's impossible not to be swept into it. You're surrounded by people who've lived and nearly died together, who feast and fight and laugh like this every night. Eventually the meal winds down. The family licks their fingers, tosses bones to the dogs, and wipes faces on sleeves that could use immediate retirement. You scrape the last of your stew with the devotion of a person extracting final drops of happiness from the universe. Cleanup begins. You collect bowls and bones, clearing benches as the household relaxes. Olaf belches with the confidence of someone who never worries about social consequences. A chorus of smaller belches follows. You burp silently because you enjoy breathing. As the fire settles, furs are dragged out and bodies pile around the hearth. Some continue telling stories, others drift quickly into sleep. You retreat to your straw nest near Harold, full of stew fumes and mild resentment, but also a surprising measure of contentment. You didn't eat the meat. You didn't sit at the table. You didn't tell a heroic story, but you survived the dinner party. You stayed warm. You ate something vaguely edible. You almost felt part of things. And for a captive far from home, that's not nothing. Tomorrow you'll be back to chores, gruel, and cold rivers, but tonight the fire crackles, the smoke hangs gently, and the longhouse hums you to sleep. Dinner may be complicated, belonging even more so, but you're still here, still breathing, still surviving. Even in a world without Wi-Fi, gossip thrives. You overhear debates about whose axe is shinier and whether Thor personally blesses good beer. You quickly learn that Vikings, while brilliant at pillaging, are equally skilled at chatting. The Longhouse, during its non-raiding hours, becomes the Norse equivalent of a break room where everyone has an opinion and none of those opinions are backed by peer-reviewed evidence. But that's fine, nobody here cares about sources unless you mean I heard it from Sigrid's cousin's brother's wife. The number one topic? Raids, obviously. who was planning one, who just returned from one, and who embarrassed themselves by falling off the boat before the fighting even started. Apparently that last one happened twice last month. He's now called Seagull Snack. You hear tales swapped over carving knives and stew bowls, whispered behind shields, muttered while mending tunics. One evening, you catch Olaf arguing with another farmer about the best route to sail to Northumbria. The men compare currents, winds, and coastal towns like two dads debating shortcuts through IKEA. There are bragging rights in raiding well, and even bigger bragging rights in returning alive with loot and story material. Then, there is blacksmith gossip, a special category of complaining where smiths measure their social worth by whose furnace runs hotter and whose hammer strikes the truest. You once overheard two blacksmiths loudly arguing whether one of them had secretly switched to cheap charcoal. Their voices were so heated everything within 10 feet spontaneously became 40 spicier. But the crown jewel of the Viking rumour mill? Divine endorsements. You've heard at least 6 competing stories about which warrior has been personally blessed by Thor, Odin, or Freya. People swear Thor zapped lightning near someone's axe mid-battle. Someone else insists Odin visited their uncle in a dream and told him to buy more sheep. Another claims Freya helped them sell a cow at a suspiciously favourable price. You nod politely when these tales are told. You've learned that questioning them is social suicide. Women in the Longhouse run their own information network, subtle, deadly efficient, and absolutely undefeated. They discuss births, marriages, crops, and who definitely watered down the ale last week. You once heard 3 women collectively confirm that someone as brother S and neighbour S and son was secretly terrible at rowing, and by morning, the entire settlement knew. Even Harold the goat seemed aware. Some evenings, gossip turned spicy. A farmer S, a daughter, is rumoured to be seeing the handsome hunter who lives 2 fjords over, and suddenly everyone has an opinion about it, including Harold, who bleats appropriately whenever the girl's name is mentioned. You half wonder if gossip is the only true universal language. The most confusing moment comes when Olaf's wife, Astrid, tells another woman that Bjorn was acting like a turnip. You're unsure whether this is an insult, a compliment, or an observational statement about someone's posture. Nobody explains, so you just nod as if you totally get it. Sometimes gossip actually helps. You overhear which farms need extra hands, who might trade wool for tools, or which farmstead is hiding a batch of decent ale. Information is power, especially when you are low on the social ladder. You learn to listen quietly, absorbing facts like a sponge that occasionally smells of goat. Of course, gossip is not merely recreational, it's how news spreads. No heralds, no newsletters, just mouths moving faster than swords. When a neighbouring clan suffers a famine, you hear about it before the chief does. When a new baby is born, the story travels through the longhouse before the child finishes its first sneeze. Late at night, when the fire dims and most people drift to sleep, the whispers continue. Someone quietly wonders whether the gods prefer oak sacrifices or pine, and another claims that Odin likes oak except on Wednesdays. You lie in your straw bed, Harold softly chewing nearby, and listen as the murmur of voices blends into the crackling fire. You never thought you'd care about who sharpened their axe with whose whetstone. But somehow, this daily swirl of stories and rumours gives rhythm to life. It makes the Longhouse feel less like a prison and more like a messy, smoky, slightly chaotic community. No Wi-Fi, no newspapers, just stories, and there are always more coming. You might be a thrall, but you're now a thrall with tea. The Norse news network never sleeps. And honestly, thank goodness, because sometimes gossip tastes better than stew. One day you meet the women warriors shield maidens who could destroy you in both battle and a staring contest. It starts innocently. You are hauling a suspiciously heavy basket of turnips across the settlement when a shout echoes across the courtyard. You look up and immediately wish you hadn't. Striding toward you are 3 women who look like they were carved from the same granite as the mountains behind them. They wear mail shirts, carry round shields adorned with swirling knotwork, and have blades at their belts that whisper, "We have seen things." Your brain briefly tries to reassure you. They are probably just passing through. You're not on their radar. Your brain is wrong. The tallest of the 3 stops in front of you. She looks down, not because she's trying to intimidate you, though she is succeeding, but because you are holding a basket of turnips like it's a shield of shame. Her eyes narrow. She says something in Old Norse that sounds like an accusation but might just be good morning. You attempt a polite nod and accidentally resemble a pigeon having an existential crisis. She laughs a short, sharp sound. You're not sure if that is good or bad, probably both. The other shield maidens examine you with interest usually reserved for unusual insects. One gestures at your arms, which are about as impressive as uncooked noodles. She raises an eyebrow. You shrug as if to say, "I didn't choose this body. This body chose me." They pass their shields between them, broad, round slabs of wood, rimmed with iron, painted with spirals that seem to move if you stare too long. You touch one and immediately regret it. The shield feels alive, heavy with the memory of deflecting actual axes. Your finger brushes a deep gouge that screams battle trauma. You withdraw your hand immediately, convinced the shield just judged you. Then comes a demonstration. One of the women lifts her sword not ceremoniously but casually, like she's about to slice bread. She swings it at a wooden post nearby, cleaving it in half as if it were a passive-aggressive tree stump that owed her money. You stare, turnips forgotten, jaw slightly unhinged. In your old life, the most dangerous thing you'd seen was a goat kick in a bucket. This is multiple levels above your pay grade. The women laugh among themselves, confident, relaxed, terrifying. They talk about raids, not in the bragging tone of men trying to impress each other, but instead with a matter-of-fact practicality. There were 12 of them. The wind was bad. Helga got a new spear. It did excellent stabbing. You realize these women don't train to fight, they fight because it's what they do. Like cooking or weaving, except with more emotional consequences and blood. Despite the mortal terror coursing through your veins like someone replaced your blood with cold porridge, there's admiration. They move with purpose. They laugh loudly. They are alive in a way few people are not because they were reckless, but because they know exactly who they are. They are terrifying, and also kind of your new heroes. One of them, the youngest maybe early 20s, with a braid that could double as a whip, steps closer. She tilts her head, studying you. Then she reaches out and taps the turnip basket, as if selecting a new training weapon. You freeze, assuming she is about to challenge you to mortal combat. Instead, she takes a turnip. She nods approvingly, then walks away crunching into it like it is the world air's most aggressive apple. You stand there, basket lighter, soul heavier. Before leaving, the tall one turns back and gives you a nod, a gesture you interpret as, "You survived our presence. Congratulations." As they disappear toward the training field, you watch them go, a sense of awe blooming in your chest. These women are legends. They train with swords, ride horses, raid alongside men, and apparently eat turnips raw like some kind of savage produce gods. Later, you hear that these shield maidens rarely settle until they've either retired from raiding or gotten bored of being living war machines. Some marry, some keep fighting, some become skalds, telling stories of battles while polishing their weaponry in a threateningly poetic way. The gossip about them runs wild. Some say shield maidens can see the future. Others say they speak directly to Valkyries. The most believable rumour? They once laughed so hard at a drunken man's flirting that he moved to another village out of shame. That evening you recount your run-in to the other thralls. They nod solemnly, as though you've had an important spiritual encounter. One even pats your shoulder, whispering reverently. You looked them in the eyes and lived. You pretend you're fine. You're absolutely not fine. Your brain replays the sword swing on loop, accompanied by your inner monologue screaming, "Danger!" respectfully, "Danger!" Still walking back to the longhouse in the blue hush of dusk, you find yourself standing a little taller. Not because you've gained muscles, you have not, but because you've brushed against power, real power, and it did not crush you. Tomorrow you'll be back to turnips, laundry, and the quiet company of Harold the goat. But today? Today you met the shield maidens. Today you witnessed what courage looks like when armed with steel and zero patience. Terrifying, weirdly inspiring, unforgettable. Every so often, Olaf and his friends head to a local blotter ritual feast for the gods. There's chanting, animal sacrifices, and a general tone of "we hope this works or winter will eat us." You first learn about the blot when Olaf announces it at breakfast between mouthfuls of salted fish. He says something about honouring Odin, blessing the harvest, and definitely not sacrificing any humans this time. You notice that this time lands a little too casually for your taste. You eat your porridge faster. Preparation begins days in advance. The longhouse buzzes with activity. Women brew ale in great bubbling vats. Men polish weapons that are not technically part of the ceremony, but make them feel cooler. And children practice chanting runic phrases with the enthusiasm of a kid's choir that accidentally joined a cult. You are given a job, hauling firewood, which is the medieval equivalent of being told, "We don't trust you with anything expensive." You gather logs while trying to remember every story you've heard about human sacrifice, doing mental math like, if 3 goats and a pig are enough, that means I'm safe probably. The blot is held in a sacred grove near the settlement, the kind of place that makes birds go quiet and makes you regret not wearing thicker socks. Everyone gathers at twilight, carrying torches, chanting, laughing, and occasionally tripping. At the centre of the grove stands an altar stone sprinkled with dried blood, mostly animal. You tell yourself with conviction you absolutely do not feel. The priest, a goth-adjacent man with a magnificent beard and the attitude of someone who knows the gods group chat, steps forward. He raises a carved bowl and calls upon the gods in a voice that could shake mountains, or at least vibrate mediocre turnips. The chanting begins. The entire community joins in. You mumble along, hoping nobody notices you have the pronunciation skills of a confused goose. Someone hands you a branch dipped in ale. You assume this is symbolic and do not attempt to drink it. Good call the last thrall who did that had to muck pig stools for a week. Then come the sacrifices, goats, pigs, sometimes cattle, if the community is feeling especially generous. The animals are dispatched quickly, much more humanely than your anxiety suggested. The priest collects their blood in a bowl and sprinkles it onto the crowd using the sacred branch. You get hit in the face. Congratulations, you're spiritually moisturized. Everyone cheers. You try to cheer too, but you're wiping blood from your eyelashes while reconsidering your life choices. Once the animals are sacrificed, the feast begins. The meat is cooked right there in the grove over massive fires. Vikings pass out ale and roasted cuts like Oprah giving away cars. You get a haunch. You get a haunch. Unfortunately, you, the thrall, receive the Oprah equivalent of a coupon. Stew. Still, it is hot, filling, and way better than breakfast, so you're thrilled. The atmosphere becomes festive. Drums beat. People dance. Someone brings out a flute carved from bone. A skald recites poetry about heroes and gods, while subtly flirting with 3 different shield maidens. The shield maidens pretend not to notice. They absolutely notice. Olaf and his friends brag about their last raid, gesturing wildly with mugs of ale like men who definitely shouldn't be holding liquids. One claims that during a storm at sea, he saw Thor riding the clouds and smashing lightning into the waves. Another swears Odin appeared to him as a one-eyed raven. A third insists Freya once borrowed his horse, though nobody believes that one. You stand back, sipping your ale, watching the flames dance against the dark northern sky. You feel the thrum of something ancient, the belief that the world is alive, that gods listen, and that rituals matter. It's unsettling but also strangely beautiful. There's a sense of belonging here, even if you're on the fringe, even if your role is small. Then the priest begins a blessing for the harvest, waving his arms in patterns that make you think he missed a calling as an interpretive dancer. The crowd joins in, chanting louder, calling on the gods to grant good crops, safe raids, and mild winters. You close your eyes and quietly ask for fewer laundry days. Eventually the ritual winds down. People drift toward home in staggered merry clusters. Some sing, others stumble. A few misplace their shoes and walk barefoot without noticing. The forest returns to its usual silence. Though you swear, you can still hear echoes of the chant in the trees. Walking back, you realize you survived a religious ceremony without being sacrificed a win. You're also warm, full, and pleasantly buzzed bigger win. Later, lying in your straw bed, smelling faintly of smoke, pork, and spiritual confusion, you reflect on the night. No Wi-Fi, no cathedral, no official pamphlet explaining the ritual. Just fire, faith, and the knowledge that, for this community, the gods are not far away. They are in the thunder, the sea, the soil, and maybe the goat that once stopped staring at you. You fall asleep hoping the gods heard everyone's prayers, especially the ones about a mild winter, and definitely the ones about please dawn to sacrifice me. The North in winter is an endurance test designed by someone who hates joy. You wake up to frost on your eyelashes and ice in your water bucket. You once thought winter was quaint snowflakes, cozy fires, maybe a nice woolen blanket. Forget all of that. Here, winter hits like a personal vendetta. The cold doesn't just settle around you, it infiltrates your bones, negotiates a lease, and starts rearranging the furniture in your joints. Every morning feels like an ambush. You open your eyes, and your eyelashes crackle from frozen breath. Your straw mattress is so stiff it could qualify as a weapon. Even Harold the goat looks miserable, and goats are nature's professional optimists. Olaf declares that winter builds character. You privately suspect it builds regret. Your daily routine now revolves around preventing your limbs from becoming historical popsicles. Before the sun stirs, you re-up, stumbling through the longhouse like a haunted scarecrow, trying to find your shoes, which are also cold, also stiff, and also definitely judging you. The longhouse itself is a battlefield. The central fire is the only source of heat, and even it seems to be struggling emotionally. People huddle around it like penguins in wool cloaks, fighting for flames like it's a Black Friday sale. The smoke clings to your hair and clothes, ensuring that even if you survive winter, you'll smell like a brisket forever. Breakfast is a tragic affair. The porridge is colder than your excess silent treatment. You eat it anyway, because the alternative is starvation, which feels rude and unproductive. Sometimes someone remembers to warm the pot. Today is not that day. You choke it down, convincing yourself this is how champions are made. It does not help. Outside, the world is beautiful in a this could kill you sort of way. Snow blankets the ground in knee-high drifts, pristine, sparkling, and aggressively inconvenient. Every chore becomes an Arctic expedition. Fetching water means hacking through ice like you are mining for treasure that isn't there. Carrying firewood feels like a punishment for crimes you haven't admitted to. Your fingers, despite layers of wool, are permanently in a state of emotional crisis. The livestock don't care about your suffering. They still need feeding. You trudge to the barn, wind whipping your face so fiercely you consider apologizing to nature just so it'll stop. The animals stare at you with mild entitlement. They're warm. You are not. You shovel out frozen muck, questioning every life choice that brought you here. Yes, including the time you stole that extra biscuit as a child. It all feels connected somehow. Hygiene, not a winter activity. Bathing would mean freezing solid mid-scrub, your final form, a clean but very dead statue. Instead, you rely on smoke, animal fat, and prayer. Laundry becomes a negotiation. How dirty is too dirty? The answer is more than you'd think. Everyone smells faintly of wood smoke, wool, sweat, and despair. Oddly, you get used to it. Evenings are both blessing and curse. You return to the longhouse grateful to be inside, yet painfully aware that inside feels only slightly warmer. Olaf and his family lounge close to the fire, regaling each other with stories of past winters where things were much worse. You wonder how that is physically possible. Apparently one year they had to dig tunnels to move between buildings. You don't ask follow-up questions. You don't want those details in your dreams. To pass the time, people knit, mend tools and carve trinkets. Someone tells sagas epic stories of gods, heroes and frost trolls, all of whom sound like they'd be fine in this weather. You pull your thin blanket around your shoulders, imagining you too are blessed by the gods. You are not. The only blessing you get is sitting slightly closer to the fire because you finished hauling wood without crying. On particularly bad nights, storms roll in. The wind howls like rejected Valkyries, rattling the walls as if demanding entry. Snow piles against the door. The longhouse groans. Inside, everyone silently considers whether moving south and becoming a monk might be the better path, even the Vikings. Astrid mutters something about Iceland being warmer. No one believes her. Sometimes you are sent outside during a storm because Olaf notices the goats are restless. The goats are fine. Olaf just enjoys testing your will to live. You stomp out, bundled in every scrap of wool available, and nearly blow away. The moonlight reflects off the snow, illuminating a world that looks peaceful, but absolutely is not. You whisper to the goats, begging them not to move. They stare back, unimpressed. Despite the misery, winter does create moments of strange beauty. You look up one night to see the sky shimmer curtains of green and violet dancing across the darkness. The aurora. Even Olaf falls silent. The whole settlement stands outside in the biting cold, gazing upward. For a moment you feel the magic they worship, the wild, ancient pulse of this land. Then your toes start going numb, and you remember that magic doesn't equal warmth. You sprint inside before frostbite claims you, promising your toes that you'll never take them for granted again. Surviving winter becomes an art. You learn to sleep curled like a pretzel near the fire, to wrap your feet in extra wool, to ignore the goat snoring beside your head. You learn to be grateful for small victories, warm stew, dry socks, a day without wind. Mostly, you learn that winter ends, eventually. Until then, you and your fellow thralls endure together one frozen morning, one smoky evening, one mediocre porridge bowl at a time. It is cold, it is relentless, it is awful, but you're still standing, or crouching, or hobbling, whatever it is you're surviving. Over time, you start picking up the language. You can now say food, sleep, and please, don't hit me. Progress. It begins with necessity, the simple survival instinct that forces your brain to accept new words the way you once accepted questionable leftovers. You listen, you imitate, you make sounds that feel like rocks tumbling out of your mouth. Norse is not a gentle language. It is like every sentence is preparing to raid a monastery. Your first lessons aren't formal. There is no classroom, no chalkboard, no kindly teacher asking you to conjugate peaceful verbs like to frolic. Your teachers are people yelling, goats bleating, and Olaf grunting emphatically while pointing at a bucket. Through trial, error, and mild panic, you eventually learn that word means bucket and not throw that at me, which you unfortunately did the day before. Your vocabulary develops round survival. Food, water, work, stop. Please stop. Seriously, stop. I hate turnips. Words stick unevenly. You can discuss farming tools with surprising fluency, but still cannot tell if someone is praising you or insulting your haircut. Context clues help, but not reliably. You've laughed too often at things that were not jokes. The hardest part is pronunciation. Norse has sounds that your old tongue did not sign up for. There's a vowel that requires the facial expression of someone smelling spoiled milk. There's another sound you'd swear is just a polite cough. Every time you speak, it sounds like you're trying to summon a small woodland creature. The children love to teach you new words. They take great joy in telling you the wrong ones just to watch chaos unfold. One day, a child tells you the phrase for thank you. You repeat it proudly to Astrid. She stares, blinks, then asks why you just called her goat a soggy disappointment. The children laugh so hard they nearly swallow their own tongues. Eventually, Astrid takes pity on you and teaches you properly. She doesn't speak your language, but she has that special teacher-esque patience, the kind that suggests she has trained at least 5 stubborn oxen. She gestures, repeats, encourages. It's strangely comforting. You repeat after her, trying your best, and she nods when you get it right. You briefly consider weeping with gratitude. Sometimes Olaf tests your progress. He asks questions in Norse simple ones like, bring that or lift this. You do your best. When you succeed, he nods approvingly. When you fail, he sighs and mutters something that might mean good try but probably means why is this my life? The insults are especially tricky. Vikings have an entire Olympic event worth of insults, many involving livestock and improbable anatomy. You learn that calling someone a fish-brained sheep tongue is somehow mild, but comparing them to a turnip is devastating. You file this away. One day, it may save your life. Religious vocabulary sneaks in too. Words for God, sacrifice, blessing, and don't stand there or the gods will smite you. You pretend to understand, nodding gravely, hoping that if the gods are watching, they appreciate your effort. After months, you can hold a very basic conversation, and by conversation you mean you can respond to simple commands without accidentally destroying property. You understand jokes now. You even make a few. They're mostly self-deprecating and terrible, but Vikings appreciate boldness, and your boldness is really just linguistic confusion masquerading as confidence. Then comes the real test. Gossip comprehension. One evening, during dinner, you catch a snippet of conversation. Olaf tells a neighbour that Bjorn cannot row straight, even with a god pushing him. Everyone laughs. You laugh too, not because they do, but because you understood it. You understood. Actual comprehension. You nearly faint. Encouraged, you try speaking. More. Sometimes it works. Sometimes you accidentally propose marriage to a shield maiden. You were trying to ask where the bucket was. She declines gently, but offers you a turnip for bravery. You accept and eat it in silence, contemplating your choices. Over time, Your mind begins to think in Norse fragments. You dream half in your old language, half in this new one. You wake up unsure which words belong where. It is disorienting, but also strangely satisfying, like your brain has decided to go bilingual without politely notifying you. Still, there are days when you regress. You forget common words and resort to pointing. You mix up axe and bread, which results in awkward breakfast moments. But nobody laughs at you cruelly, except the children. They always laugh. It is their nature. One night, Astrid hands you a small piece of carved wood, a rune. She says it represents luck. The word is simple, but her voice is warm. You clutch it, realizing language is no longer just a tool to survive, it as a bridge to belonging. You're still a thrall. You're still far from home. But now, when people talk, you hear more than noise. You hear stories, jokes, complaints about weather. And most importantly, when someone says, "Please don't hit me," you know exactly what they mean. You think about running away, but the landscape is all forests, wolves, and confusion. The locals know every path. You know nothing except which moss looks vaguely edible. It starts as a daydream, the kind you indulge in while scrubbing Olaf's questionable socks. Someday you'll sneak away, slip into the trees and make it home. A noble fantasy, a terrible plan. Because the moment you step outside the settlement's tidy ring of longhouses, you realize the world is not made of convenient roads and polite signposts. No, it's trees. All trees. An infinite IKEA of pine. They stretch in every direction like they're trying to confuse you personally. And they succeed. Your first attempt never actually becomes an attempt, more of a test run in your mind. You picture yourself tiptoeing past sleeping dogs, whispering apologies to Harold the goat, then sprinting into the night like a dramatic hero. But then you remember, there is snow. You cannot sprint in snow. You can barely walk in snow. In reality, you'd get 10 feet before collapsing like a startled deer. So you postpone. Still, the idea grows. Whenever you hear talk of another raid, or see Olaf grease an axe with suspicious enthusiasm, you think, maybe it is time. But then someone mentions wolves, or bears, or trolls, which may or may not exist, but either way, you decide maybe tomorrow. One chilly afternoon, you wander just a little farther than usual while gathering firewood. Freedom tickles your brain. The trees whisper, "Run." The wind whispers, "Run." Your bladder whispers, "You forgot to pee before leaving." Everything is telling you something. So you go, just a little. The forest absorbs you instantly, soundless, vast, judgmental. Every direction looks exactly the same. You try to orient yourself using moss, like the one traveller once explained, but the moss is everywhere, thriving like it's trying to win an award. You pick the direction where the moss looks slightly angrier and start walking. 5 minutes later, you're lost. You're not just lost, you are existentially misplaced. The forest is too quiet. You decide to call it meditation and breathe deeply, even though the air is so cold it threatens to pickle your lungs. Then you hear a howl, not a cute dog howl. This creature has opinions about your meat howl. Your soul immediately leaves your body, checks the warranty, then returns and says, "Let's go home." You turn around, confident you remember the way. You do not. You walk left. You walk right. You walk in a circle. You pass the same tree 3 times. You recognize it because it looks like it's smirking. The prospect of being eaten by a wolf suddenly seems less glamorous than previously imagined. You clutch your small pile of sticks like they will protect you. They will not. A stick has never saved anyone from a predator unless it was on fire, and you do not have fire. You barely have competence. Just as panic begins to bubble, you hear voices, human voices speaking Norse, and, laughing, you follow, stumbling toward the sound with the optimism of someone who has learned nothing. The trees open to reveal two Viking teenagers gathering firewood. They stare at you like you fell from the sky. In a way, you did socially, geographically, spiritually. They ask why you were out here. You panic and say something that roughly translates to, "I was practicing walking." They nod like this is a reasonable hobby, then gesture for you to follow them back. You do, like a lost duckling, because you are one. Back at the settlement, the teenagers tell Olaf where they found you. Olaf looks at you, sighs, and mutters a phrase you've learned means, "I don't get paid enough for this." He gestures you back to work. You nod obediently, returning to your chores with the quiet shame of someone who discovered that their action movie escape plan had the runtime of a snowflake. A few nights later, you ask another thrall if anyone has ever successfully escaped. He shrugs. "Maybe," he says. "If they made it, they didn't come back to brag about it." You consider this. Maybe someone made it across the sea, back to their homeland, lived quietly, and told no one where they came from. Maybe they got eaten by wolves before they finished their heroic speech. Both seem equally possible, so you shelve the dream for now, not forever, just until you have proper supplies, a map, a companion, warm boots, a goddess personal blessing, maybe a shield maiden with impressive upper body strength, reasonable things. Until then, you stick close to the longhouse, aware that yes, the Vikings are captors, but the wilderness is worse. At least Olaf feeds you, at least Harold likes you, at least the longhouse is predictable. Escape is a story for later. For now, survival is enough. Besides, you are finally learning the language. It would be rude to leave before you can say more than "please don't hit me." Despite the brutality, there are moments of humanity. Olaf's wife gives you extra bread one day. A child shares a wooden toy, and suddenly the world feels a little less sharp around the edges. It catches you off guard, really. You have spent so much time tensing every muscle, expecting barked orders, cold nights, and the constant reminder that you're not here by choice. Then, without warning, the universe slides a tiny scrap of gentleness across the table and says, "Here." Don't say "I never gave you anything." It begins with Astrid. She's not outwardly warm, more like a stern schoolteacher who occasionally feeds you. But one morning after chores, she hands you a piece of flatbread still warm from the hearth. She doesn't say anything. She just presses it into your hand and turns away. No ceremony, no speech. But that warmth spreads from your palm to your stomach to something deeper, like the bread is fueling more than your body. You eat slowly, savoring every bite, pretending it's not making your eyes suspiciously damp. From that point on, you begin noticing pockets of kindness, where you least expect them. The other thralls, your co-workers in the ongoing unpaid internship from hell, show you tricks to make chores less miserable. One teaches you how to wrap straw inside your shoes to keep your toes warm. Another sneaks you a bit of a honey left over from a festival, whispering, "The gods want to miss it." Once, while tending goats, one of the younger women silently hands you a thicker cloak. It smells like pine and sheep, but it's the first time you've been warm outdoors since, well, ever. She shrugs when you thank her, like she loaned you a spoon rather than a piece of her own comfort. The children are the boldest. One afternoon, a small boy plops down beside you while you are repairing fence posts. He doesn't speak your old tongue. You barely speak his. Still, he shows you his carved wooden horse, a knobbly little creature with a lopsided face. You pretend to gallop it across the snow, making ridiculous hoof sounds. He laughs so hard he snorts, then hands you the toy, just gives it to you. You try to refuse, the horse is obviously prized, but he insists. You keep it tucked under your blanket at night, a reminder that joy can sneak through cracks no matter how heavy the walls around you. Even Olaf surprises you. Sometimes, one evening, he sees you struggling with a load of firewood twice your size. He grunts, takes half the bundle from your arms and carries it inside. He doesn't make a big deal of it. He doesn't expect thanks. He just helps. Later, he pushes a mug of ale toward you at dinner, only a few sips, but still, you drink it like a secret blessing. These flashes of kindness never erase the reality. You're still a thrall. You still do back-breaking chores, eat last, sleep with the goats, and live under someone else's command. But the hard lines of captivity blur slightly when someone remembers you're a human. There's an old thrall named Era who once lived in the east. She speaks of mercy like it's a rare herb that grows only in hidden valleys. She tells you here, even the strong bend sometimes. The gods expect it. Her voice is slow, thoughtful, shaped by years of surviving things you can't imagine. You watch as Vikings treat their families with fierce loyalty, laughing, comforting, defending. They love boldly, joke loudly, and mourn openly. When a hunter from a nearby settlement dies from illness, the entire community gathers. They sing, they tell stories, they honor his life so fully that even you, a stranger, feel the weight of his absence. You realize something. Cruelty is not their default, it's just one of the tools they wield, like a sword or a hammer. But so is kindness, unexpected, unpolished, and sometimes confusing but real. Some evenings, as the longhouse settles into quiet, you sit by the dying fire, the wooden horse in your pocket. You think of your old home familiar voices, warm sunlight, soft earth. You wonder if anyone there is thinking of you. Harold the goat curls beside you, lending his questionable warmth. You scratch behind his ears. He bleats contentedly and falls asleep. Somehow that feels like another small kindness. It does not change your fate. It doesn't free you. But it reminds you that in this strange northern world of gods and snow and axes, heart still exists. Sometimes it hands you bread. Sometimes it gives you a wooden horse. Sometimes it just sits beside you and stays. And in the bleakness of captivity, that might be the brightest light you get. Years later, a new group of traders arrives. You overhear talk of ransom. Someone recognizes your name, a miracle wedged between a pile of reindeer hides and a shouting match about whether salted fish counts as currency. It has been long enough that your old life feels like a blurry dream, warm summers, familiar lanes, a bed that didn't contain goat hair as a structural element. But today, the market in town is buzzing with unfamiliar voices, accents that crack open old memories in your chest. Olaf brings you and two other thralls along, partly to carry goods, partly to make sure he doesn't have to do any chores for a few hours. You shuffle behind, carefully balancing a sack of barley that weighs more than your self-esteem. The market is chaos, as always, a medley of shouting, bargaining, laughing, and mildly insulting each other's livestock in the name of commerce. You scan the crowd. Mostly out of habit, you've learned that a person can learn everything just from watching who's arguing over which goat is clearly too handsome to be ordinary. Then you hear it. Your name, not your new Norse nickname Leaf bestowed, because you once fell out of a hayloft with all the grace of decaying foliage. No, your actual name. You freeze. The sack of barley slips and hits the ground with a sad plop of grain. Olaf grunts, unfazed. He assumes you're being your usual clumsy self, but your heart is galloping like a horse that just remembered it has legs. You turn, slowly searching the crowd. They're a merchant, dressed in finer clothes than most here, speaking to a local. You hear your name again. The syllables feel sharp and electric, like a spark catching dry tinder. You drift closer, barely forgotten, pulse roaring in your ears. The merchant looks older than you remember anyone being back home, weathered from travel, carrying exhaustion like it is his greatest treasure. But something in his eyes is familiar. He speaks your name a third time, and this time it is held gently, like something precious he thought he'd lost. You step forward. Your voice cracks. "That's me." Silence. The merchant stares and you stare back. His face shifts shock, disbelief, hope, all tangled together. He says your name again, softer, like trying to confirm a ghost. He asks questions, your family, your village, the silly nickname you had as a child. You answer them all, each word stitching you back into the person you used to be. Olaf wanders over, curious. He listens, arms folded, expression unreadable beneath the beard that has seen more winters than your memory can count. The merchant explains your family survived. They sought you. They sent coin, letters, messengers. But the world is large and cruel. The trail went cold. Now, by improbable chance, he has found you. There is talk of ransom silver in exchange for your freedom. Olaf's eyes sharpen. You have value beyond your labor now. You are negotiable, a resource. It is unsettling and hopeful at once. The bargaining begins. It is not gentle. They argue like two men haggling over a particularly charming goat. Silver weights change hands, purses empty, conditions are muttered. You stand off to the side, numb and trembling. The market continues around you, life, noise, smell, while yours balances on the edge of a scale. Some part of you is terrified. What if Olaf refuses? What if the merchant cannot pay enough? What if this is just another cruel trick of hope? But then it is done. Olaf nods. The merchant clasps your shoulder. You're not sure what to feel. A lifetime of servitude has reshaped you. You're not the person who was taken years ago. You dream in two languages. You know the rhythm of the longhouse fire. You know Harold S. snores better than your mother's voice. Leaving feels both like salvation and heartbreak. Astrid watches from a distance. Her face is unreadable. The youngest child, now older, taller, waves. You realize he remembers you. He presses your wooden horse into your hand, the one he gave you years ago. Somehow, you've kept it all this time. Harold the goat ambles over, bleats, and lightly headbutts your knee, his version of goodbye. You scratch behind his ears. He pretends not to care because goats are emotionally unavailable. Olaf gives you a solemn nod. Not warm, not cold, just acknowledgement. He has never said much, but this gesture feels like a blessing, or at least a try not to die. You leave with the merchant, your rescuer, your tether to the past. As the village shrinks behind you, you can help glancing back, half expecting Olaf to call you back for one last chore. He doesn't. The road ahead is long. You don't know if home will feel like home. You don't know who is still waiting. But you know this. You were taken. You survived. And now, impossibly, you're going back. The future is terrifying, but for the first time in years, it belongs to you. You are back on a longship, this time as a passenger rather than property. The ocean still smells the same briny and indifferent. It's strange, stepping aboard the kind of vessel that once dragged you into a new life. Back then, you were cargo tied up beside a sack of fish that received better customer service than you did. Now you're treated with not dignity exactly, but basic human respect. You have a seat. You have a blanket. You're unlikely to be whacked with an oar for breathing wrong. Progress. The merchant, your rescuer, helps you settle in near the mast. You touch the wood and it feels familiar, like shaking hands with an old enemy you've begrudgingly come to understand. The grain is worn smooth by countless voyages, and the rhythmic creak of the hull whispers stories you can't help but listen to. The crew sets off, pushing away from the docks with long strokes. The oars slice through the water, steady and powerful like a heartbeat. The sea welcomes you back with a slap of salty spray to the face, a sort of maritime greeting card sentiment. You survived the first time. Let's see about round 2. As the coastline shrinks, you watch the village fade into a cluster of tiny roofs. You expect to feel triumph, relief, and you do, but something else lingers beneath it. A tug in your chest. Strange. You thought you'd leave without a second thought. Instead, you think of Astrid handing you bread, the boy giving you the wooden horse, Olaf muttering approval in his gruff non-language. You think of Harold the goat, stubborn and singular. You swallow hard. It is complicated. The sea does what the sea does. It rolls. It splashes. It threatens to end you if you look at it wrong. The wind bites at your face, colder than betrayal. You pull your cloak tighter, a gift from Astrid, and pretend it's enough. It isn't he. Nothing is. The ocean has no time for your feelings. It just keeps being oceany, big, cold, and convinced it should be in charge. At least you're not tied down this time. You can move, stretch, even speak without being shushed by someone twice your size. The crew talks among themselves, trading stories about raids, storms, and a man who once ate an entire barrel of salted herring by mistake. You laugh along, quietly, understanding only half the words but all of the humour. Seagulls circle overhead, screaming like they've just learned disappointing news about their inheritance. You never liked them. They always seemed like the ocean's tax collectors, loud, smug, and ready to steal anything that looks like a snack. One follows the ship aggressively, eyeing your bread. You glare back. The gull remains unimpressed. Hours stretch. Days pass. The sea is a fickle companion. Sometimes calm, soft waves lapping the hull like a cat needing a blanket. Other times cruel winds whipping, waves rising, the whole ship rocking like a toddler shaking a toy to see what falls off. You learn to brace your knees, grip the railing, and accept that being dry is a privilege you will not have. At night the stars glitter overhead, silent, sharp, cold. You lie beneath them, wrapped in your cloak, the wooden horse tucked beside you under the fabric. You trace its uneven edges with your thumb, a tether between worlds. Old life, new life, uncertain future. One night the merchant sits beside you. He speaks of home, familiar fields, quiet roads, the smell of baking bread. His face softens when he talks about your family. They never stopped looking, he says. They refused to believe you were gone. Something inside you breaks and mends all at once. You ask what he remembers of your home. He tells you small things: who married whom, which orchard is still standing, how your father still complains about that fence he never finished. You laugh, surprised to find your voice cracking under the weight of memory. He asks about your life in the north. You hesitate. How to explain Olaf, Astrid, the children, the goat, the way brutality and kindness dance together in the strange, clumsy circles. You settle on the truth. It was hard, but I lived. The merchant seems to understand. Days fade into each other, rowing, eating, watching the horizon. You listen to the sea, to the wind, to the creak of wood. You wonder if your old home will recognize you. You wonder if you will recognize it. Then one morning someone shouts, "Land!" A misty coastline emerges, green hills dotted with trees. The crew murmurs, adjusting sails. Your chest tightens. This is it, the place you left. The ship glides toward shore, seagulls hollering their usual nonsense. As you draw near, memories flood your mind, laughter, old paths, warm rooms. You grip the wooden horse. You breathe. The longship touches sand, and for the first time in years, You step onto the soil you once called home not as cargo, but as someone who left, lived and returned. The sea behind you does not care. It keeps rolling, but you care, and that's enough. Your village barely recognizes you. You've got a 1,000-yard stare and a new appreciation for indoor plumbing that won't exist for centuries. It is almost funny you've dreamed of this moment 1,000 times. You pictured triumphant music, familiar faces, maybe someone handing you a warm pie and saying we missed you. Instead, you arrive on a drizzly afternoon to a village that looks smaller. The paths feel narrower, the houses shorter, and the whole place smells like mud, rain, and mild confusion. A couple of kids spot you first. They don't scream or run, they just stare, trying to decide if you're a returning neighbor or a suspiciously tall cryptid. One of them whispers, "Why is he dressed like that?" Fair question. After years of northern life, your clothing is a mishmash of homespun layers, a half-repaired cloak, and shoes that look like they were once worn by a disgruntled sheep. Your stride is different, too heavy, steady, the gait of someone who has walked through snowstorms, fjords, and emotional, turmoil powered only by questionable porridge. Then someone actually recognizes you. A gasp, a hand over their mouth, then another voice. Your name. Not yelled, not sung, spoken like a memory reluctantly becoming real. Word spreads. The quiet street fills. People form a hesitant circle, as if afraid you'd vanish if approached too quickly. Friends from your past step forward and freeze, blinking like they're trying to match your new face with the one stored in their memories. You are taller than you were. Thinner. Scarred in places you don't remember earning. Someone hugs you, a neighbor, crying into your cloak. Another touches your face, as if checking you are not an apparition. You stand there, unsure what to do with your hands, your breath, your existence. Your parents, if they're still here, approach slowly. Their hair is grayer, their posture slumped with years of waiting. When they see you, really see you, they stop. The world stops. They rush forward and gather you in a tangle of trembling arms. You feel them shaking. You might be shaking too. No words, just breathing and warmth. Inside your childhood home, everything is familiar but wrong. The doorframe is shorter than your memory. The fireplace is smaller. Even the table looks like it was made for children. Time has shrunk it all. Or maybe you've just grown too much inside and out. Neighbors gather to hear your story, but where would you even start? Hi, remember when I vanished? Funny story, Vikings. So you share pieces, edited pieces, the sailing, the cold, the chores, the bread. You leave out the darkest chapters, the fear, the sickness, the way you counted the stars sometimes to remember you were alive. No one needs that at dinner. They ask questions, of course. Did the Vikings smell? Yes. Did they eat people? No, but sometimes you wondered what ranked below porridge on their menu. Were they giants? Some, yes. Mostly their beards were giants. Kids gather close, wide-eyed, imagining your story as a heroic adventure. You don't correct them. Let them think you fought dragons rather than laundry piles the size of actual mountains. You try to settle back in sleep in your old bed, wear familiar clothes, eat normal food. But settling is a slow art. Your body wakes before dawn expecting chores. Sounds startle you, especially doors slamming or voices raised. Sometimes you drift outside at night to stare at the stars, tracing constellations you learned in a foreign sky. People treat you differently. Not badly, just differently. You've become exotic. A living saga. You meet with the local elders so they can confirm you are really you. They listen, nod, Scribble notes on parchment with the enthusiastic energy of bureaucrats who've awaited years for a good mystery. After a long discussion, they declare, "Yes, that's him. Congratulations, you are officially rebranded. You join meals, festivals, and gossip circles with new ears. You laugh at jokes about goats now, because you have trauma and experience. You glance at the sea sometimes, wondering whether it's planning to borrow you again. There are awkward moments too. Someone invites you to walk through the forest and you nearly scream no thank you, because your memories include wolves, cold nights, and your own questionable navigation skills. Your old friends notice you've changed. You carry yourself like someone who knows how to stay alive in unfamiliar places. You're slower to anger, quicker to observe. You've seen storms, human and otherwise. One afternoon, you give the wooden horse your tiny northern companion to a village child who looks at it like treasure. You smile. Life begins to settle. Softly, slowly. You tell stories, help in the fields, relearn flavors and seasons. You grow comfortable with comfort, even if it still feels strange. You are home. Mostly. Sort of. Enough. Some scars stay, some memories blur, some love returns. You breathe. You're not who you were, but you're here. And that's its own kind of miracle. You lie in bed, a real bed, and listen to the quiet hum of safety. No waves, no shouting, no ropes biting into your wrists. Just silence, warm and deep. It feels suspicious at first, like the world is trying to prank you with kindness. The mattress is stuffed with straw, not goats. It doesn't bleat. It doesn't smell like regret. You stretch your legs without hitting a boat plank or someone's elbow. Your body sighs an involuntary release, as if it has finally recognized softness and decided to melt into it. The blanket is heavier than you remember, woven from wool and familiarity. You pull it to your chin. It doesn't scratch as much as northern wool did, which is honestly a little disappointing. Growth apparently comes with higher textile standards. You close your eyes, but sleep doesn't come immediately. Your mind keeps cataloguing everything that isn't happening, no frantic rowing, no goat trying to eat your hair, no Olaf yelling about firewood. You lie there, hyper-aware of the absence of threats, like a guard dog waiting for a duty it no longer needs to perform. The window is cracked open. Fresh air drifts in, not sea brine, not smoky longhouse musk. Just the gentle scent of your homeland, damp earth, budding grass, maybe a distant cow that has no interest in ruining your evening. Night insects chirp outside, soft and unthreatening, the soundtrack of a world where you're no longer prey. Your hands move habitually to check for ropes at your wrists. None. Your ears wait for an order barked in Norse. None. Your body keeps listening for the rhythm of oars, the creak of hull, the hiss of wind. None. You laugh quietly, almost afraid the noise will summon chores. In your pocket you keep the wooden horse. It travels with you everywhere, the last piece of that northern life that didn't take something from you but gave something instead. You place it on the table beside your bed. Its lopsided face grins at you through this darker reminder of unexpected kindness, of laughter found in harsh places. Tonight, you didn't fight memories. You let them float in and out like tide's gentle ones, not the kind that try to drown you. You remember Astrid-esque bread, the children-esque games, the way winter sunlight made the snow glitter, as if the world wanted to apologize for being cold. You remember Olaf's grunt that maybe meant good job, or possibly stop petting the goat. You're not sure, it worked either way. You remember fear too, but it doesn't own you now. It is just a story you survived. Your breathing slows, your heartbeat quiets, your body, that stubborn, resilient thing, seems to understand that it's safe, truly safe, not temporarily, not dying safe. Real safe. For the first time in years, you do not stay half awake waiting for danger. You do not plan an escape route. You do not wonder if tomorrow you'll still belong to yourself. You just sleep. And when you do, it is like falling into warm water, weightless, drifting, free. There are dreams, soft ones. You see home as it was, not as it became in your memory. You see familiar faces laughing, running through fields. You see yourself, younger, unscarred, chasing sunlight instead of survival. Then the dream shifts. You're on a longship again, but this time you are not bound. You are steering. The sea is calm, the wind is gentle. You feel no fear, just possibility. You wake once, briefly. The room is still dark. The horse smiles from the table. You smile back because yes, you are communicating with a wooden toy. Trauma makes us all weird. You settle again into the mattress. It cradles you like it remembers your shape from before. Your eyes close. This time you fall asleep without hesitation. You earned this, every breath of it. And the night holds you as if it knows you're finally home. So now, as you stretch beneath your very modern blanket's cotton, probably, not wool woven by a woman named Astrid who could bench press a moose, take a slow breath. You've travelled far tonight, across oceans, across years, across the emotional spectrum of I hate boats to I love goats, but only specific ones. You survived a Viking raid before your coffee. You got dragged onto a longship without a courtesy invitation. You lived as a thrall, slept beside livestock, and learned that laundry could be a full-contact sport. You shoveled fields, froze through winter, bathed with 10 other people in a wooden tub that desperately needed boundaries. You dodged rituals, befriended warriors, and discovered that even in the chaos of a Norse longhouse, someone might hand you warm bread, no questions asked. And even when your life belonged to someone else, your spirit didn't. It stretched. It adapted. It stored away tiny mercies like warm embers for the darkest nights. Years passed. Then one day, unbelievably, your name resurfaced like a message in a bottle. You earned your freedom not by battle or trickery, but because someone remembered you. Someone looked and kept looking, and that was enough. You journeyed home one more longship, one more round of seasickness, one more seagull trying to steal your lunch. But this time, every wave carried you toward yourself, and there you stood, changed, scarred, but not broken. Your village recognized you in fragments, then wholly the way a song slowly returns to memory. You relearned comfort, you relearned quiet, you relearned the feeling of sleeping without fear, and the miracle of waking without chains. So tonight, as you tuck into your clean bed with hot water and indoor plumbing, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to the people who came before you, the ones who endured storms you'll never have to face, who walked miles barefoot, who slept beside goats, who didn't have toothpaste, but somehow survived anyway. Because history may be cold and cruel, but it's also proof that people are stubborn, hopeful, and hilariously bad at quitting. Yes, you come from a long, unbroken line of survivors. People who endured hunger, war, heartbreak, poor hygiene, and 1,000 years without ergonomic pillows. And look at you now, soft sheets, climate control, snacks that are on a dried fish. You're the dream your ancestors didn't know they could have. So let your shoulders drop. Let your thoughts drift. Let the night carry you just as gently as the sea never did. You're safe. You are home. And until morning comes, you are free to rest. Good night.